Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85, the niche sports connoisseur. We are out here grinding our way through the college basketball season. The Super Bowl is behind us, it is full speed ahead. The March to Madness is in full swing, and things are getting really, really fun. We have an 11-game main slate on DraftKings. That's going to be the primary focus of tonight's show. I see the comments are lighting up. The viewers are trickling in. It's 10:46 on the West Coast, and you guys are out here doing things big. I appreciate that. It was a solid night overall. Saw some winners, some green screens, some window trips. It's a real good aura, a good omen around here. Hit a DeAndre Hopkins anytime touchdown prop with a over 13.5 receiving yards. Felt like dead. Actually threw the ticket in my recycling bin like, it was an okay try, I guess. And then that late touchdown catch by Hop, that was a big one. That it's not quite washer and dryer season, not quite appliance season, but the missus was happy there. We coasted in today, had a nice slate over on FanDuel, and we're feeling really good. It's February. It is February. The stink of January is off. It's gone behind us. Full steam ahead. We are hopeful contests will get larger. They usually do. Should be some Survivor satellites coming too, I've heard. So lots of good stuff happening. Expanded out today the content, not only obviously article breakdowns, projections, but also expanded out and had some FanDuel projections. So now I have two separate sheets for those that are wanting to play FanDuel. Contests aren't as great there, but the pricing is so very soft. And there's a lot of things happening there. So for Tuesday content, you can expect an article breakdown, projections for DraftKings, projections for FanDuel, and of course, the on-demand version of the show you know, you love, your favorite show out there, the CBB Super Show. Let's go. Let's get into it. Hey, my man Alex, he's up late. He's getting ready. He's battle. He's loving the Tar Heels in the dumps right now, loving it, getting ready for these NC State games this week. 18 days till March? Shut up. No. I know February has like 17 days in it, but no. 18 days? Damn, you just broke my brain, Alex. You just broke my brain. PSA, everyone knows NC State season doesn't start till the first round of the ACC tournament. Hell yeah. All last year, all Patrick Ewing in Georgetown a few years back, all Wayne Tinkle of Oregon State a few years back as well. Never say never. It's not over until it's over. And the Washington Huskies are going to make some noise in the Big Ten tournament themselves. Man, I could sure go for some Wesley Yates and Nate Calmes right now with that great Osabor roster that the Huskies have. And Costco, what is up? Costco, I get my contacts from you, your pizza. My kids love your pizza. Prices don't balloon up on the food court at Costco. Appreciate you checking in with us. Thank you so much. Let's get into this. Let's do it. All the pleasantries aside, let me pull up all of my stuff. And while you're waiting, now's a great time for you to slap that like button. You guys have helped so much. The interactions, the comments during the live show, the comments on demand, the likes, the shares, the reposts, the retweets, all of that stuff helps the FTN brand itself, but also the Super Show. We're only like 2 weeks away from going to 5 days a week shows. Then we'll be into conference tournaments. We'll be doing shows every single night. You guys know how we do. Nobody grinds it harder than us in the community here at FTN. All right, let me pull up my custom layout number 7. And hence, there we are. All right, I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling good. Appreciate the positive vibes out there. All right, so if you're new to the show, what I do here, I go game by game, tried and true method. There really is nothing better out there. We'll talk a little bit about each matchup, anything that sticks out price-wise, any plays that we like, of course, any DBP stuff, all of that. And in the background there, I guess it's in the foreground. I'm more in the background now because that's what you guys want. You had talked and told me, and I present you with the projections here. So you'll see that the numbers and everything Our by team that I'm talking about, you see the price, my projected minutes, which will fluctuate here depending on news. And then down here on the DK points value, of course, we're shooting for that 4x number at minimum. So you see here what some of our numbers are here initially. This can and will change. Obviously, there's injury news every single day. That's just the way of the land. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're just in the transfer portal era now. Teams are deep, and we're just, we're dealing with athletes who are just so much stronger, faster, crazier, quicker. And we're just seeing all these injuries. And injury reporting has been really shoddy. In 2025, where we have basically cameras everywhere, social media everywhere, like you literally cannot go to the bathroom without somebody knowing about it. So I find it hard to believe sometimes we have these lack of information. 2 minutes to lock. Oh, this guy's not warming up. He, come to think of it, he didn't even travel. Like, all right, it kind of makes me want to go be the beat for, Alabama A&M someday. Maybe I will. But anyways, let's get into this first game here. Michigan versus Purdue. The Wolverines are a 2-point favorite, total of 150.5. That's a pretty high total. This Michigan team, they've been pretty fun fantasy friendly wise. Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, that game where it's which one do you roster? Golden tends to have more rostership because he is cheaper. That's been flipped in the past. Whichever one is cheaper does tend to be higher owned. I do like Danny Wolf a lot, though. That 9.2 price point, that's a pretty reasonable look for him. Purdue does not have Zach Edey. Their front court isn't as dominant, isn't as scary. They tried the Daniel Jacobson thing. He got hurt. They tried Will Berg. He's not ready. He's raw. Trey Kaufman-Wren is a beast offensively. He has some of the best footwork in the post, and he has some pretty vast array of low post moves as well. But he is foul prone, and he's not necessarily the banger down low. If you get a really strong big man down low, he can be befuddled. Caleb First is a pretty solid rebounder, but he's not the best defender on a consistent basis either. So I do think Danny Wolf has a chance to be really, really good in this game. The price of 9.2 is reasonable, affordable, and doable. So you have it projected for around 39.1 points there. I feel pretty good about that with the 33 minutes. Now, you guys know minutes projections are very, very important. Things that can throw this off. Fouls, of course, dreaded 2 fouls. Injuries, which have been popping up, or just the inexplicable Chris Beard using Malik Dia completely unorthodox and makes no sense. Malik Dia, clearly the best player on Ole Miss. I'm not biased or anything. And he plays them 2 minutes, sits him for 7, plays them 1 minute, sits him for 8. I just don't understand that. We see that with a couple of different rotations here, some Leonard Hamilton-esque things happening. So those are things that will throw off the minutes projections. And when that happens, we'll get some things like, oh, you had, Keyshawn Hall projected for 38 fantasy points. He ended up with 30. What happened? Well, he played 8 less minutes than we had him projected for. There was early foul trouble. He sat for 16 minutes in the first half. There's these various things that happen. So treat it as a piece of the research, not gospel, of course, but the R-squared is improving by the day, and the projections are pretty damn good lately. Today, especially, shorter slate, especially on FanDuel with the Charlotte and FAU game. Things were really, really accurate for that one. Very proud of today. Anyways, Michigan did change up their starting lineup slightly. We saw Roddy Gale come off the bench. He still played 25 minutes, but Reuben Jones got the start there. He played 32 minutes. He wasn't necessarily great. 3 points, 4 rebounds, a steal. He's a bit of a stand-in-the-corner guy. He does some facilitating as well. You see, he's going to project pretty well because he's only priced at a meager 3.4K. So if he plays anywhere close to 30 minutes, this system's going to think that he should be able to theoretically put up 14 or 15 points at minimum. I don't know if I believe he will. The Purdue perimeter is a little bit tougher. They force turnovers. There is some worry there for me. And if Jones doesn't start and Gale gets back in the starting lineup, that makes Reuben Jones not that appealing of an option. But at 3.4K, if he's starting, playing 30 minutes, it's pretty hard to say that he's not a great play for your lineup. And it's not even necessarily for the production he gives you. Now, there are a few new viewers out there tonight because I saw people told me they were checking out the show for the first time. I have this thing I say, sometimes these low value guys, the sub 4K options, it's less about what they're actually going to put on the table, meaning their raw points, 4, 6, 9, 12, whatever it is, and more about the lineup flexibility they provide. Rostering a cheap player like Reuben Jones, who's going to get those minutes, enables us to go up and get a Janai Broom at 11K, a Braden Smith at 10.8K, guys who consistently produce and have a high floor that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. Yes, we'd love for Reuben Jones to deliver us a 8x performance and put up 30, but that's pretty unrealistic at this point of the season as pricing tightens. We need to get to Jani Broom, Braden Smith, those types. We also need them to deliver 40 or 50 fantasy points as well, but just keep in mind there, Reuben Jones, not a great ceiling, not a great floor, but definitely a appealing look if he does get to start. As far as the rest of the guards, it's a pretty much a high variant guessing game at times. Trey Donaldson, Namari Burnett, and Roddy Gale. All of them have the upside to produce here, and I think they are fine to look at in this spot. Donaldson, a little bit priced up at 7.5, Burnett 5.3, Gale 5K, both of them relatively cheap on FanDuel lately as well. I don't hate the idea of using one of them. I think if I'm going to use anybody on the Michigan side today and it's not a starting Reuben Jones, it's just going to be Danny Wolf. I think you go the full meal deal and take him there and try to have some GPP mini stacks of him alongside with Braden Smith on the other side. Braden Smith at 10.8K. He's extremely expensive. We know that, but he's typically been worth it. And you can see, pretty much 39 to 40 minutes. He's never going to leave the floor, sans foul trouble. Put up over 40 fantasy points to the projection. His price is super high. So this is one of those cases where it's like, yeah, he's slightly under 4X. Doesn't mean he's a bad play. It's nice to have that 40 in your back pocket as a solid look there. Definitely, near the top of my wish list for this slate next to Jani Broom. Probably a little bit too tough for me to use both of them, but it's going to be possible. We have a ton of value in the next game as well with Miami-Syracuse, real barn burner. So it's certainly possible. GPP-wise, Trey Kaufman-Wren, if he stays out of foul trouble here, I do like his chances to have another large game. He is so gifted offensively. He's just doing damage to so many different opponents. USC, Indiana, Iowa. He has just been a murderer. 25, 23, and 24 real points over the last 3 games. In the Michigan game, which was a home game last time, he did have some early foul trouble, and he only played 24 minutes overall because of it. In that one, he scored 15 points, had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, put up about 26. So he's a little bit high-priced at 9.4 now being on the road against the same Michigan team. That warrants us looking at the last box score as well, see how things have changed, because they only played each other just a few weeks ago. Friday, January 24th. That was a Purdue onslaught victory at Mackey, 91-64. I think things will be much different this time with it being at home. Braden Smith had 24, 7, and 10. He was absolutely styling. Fletcher Lawyer hit a million threes. He had 18 points, 3 rebounds. Again, TKR had some foul trouble. Caleb First had some foul trouble as well. CJ Cox had a solid game, 3 steals, 11 real points. On the Michigan side, it was pretty ugly for the most part. Trey Donaldson had a bunch of turnovers. Danny Wolf was very ineffective, and Vlad Golden had 14 and 6. So the Michigan side, they just fell behind early. They didn't take advantage of the foul trouble of TKR, and Braden Smith was just an ungodly killing machine. Definitely see Michigan being much more competitive here at home. I see Danny Wolf having a much better game as well. But really the big thing here is if Reuben Jones starts, and if he does, do we believe he's going to play 30 minutes? As far as Braden Smith, he's a luxury play for me. I haven't decided if he's going to be at the top of the list, but he's definitely in that top 3 or 4 range for me, no doubt. Yes, I do. I do indeed. Prize Picks, Underdog, all that stuff. Also have DraftKings, FanDuel, and Caesars, Little Caesars. DraftKings, I hate the way they've done their player props. I have to admit, we used to be really good on DraftKings because they actually had unders and their PR. They used to offer PRAs, and their under PRAs was such a profitable bet, and I suspect that's why they took it away. So now all DraftKings does for college props on football side too is like 10 plus, 12 plus, 14 plus. You don't have an option for an under. So I don't like that as much unless I've got a play that I really feel good about, like a Malik Dia, 10 plus points, and then he plays 8 minutes. But so I like to play on FanDuel a lot there for player props, obviously Underdog and Prize Picks. And then Caesar has some pretty decent numbers as well. So I typically have those up in the morning. I do give 2 or 3 here at night as well, but the fantasy point totals don't usually get offered by Prize Picks until the morning. But yeah, definitely do player props, and we have those trackable on our FTN betting tracker as well. So we play, or we bet what we say we're going to play, and that is all held accountable for us. We can't just say we did something and then not. or pretend like we have a better record than we do. Literally would get fired if we lied about that. So in full transparency there. These cowards are so scared of losing access to the program, they won't report it. How about Hollywood Smothers, man? Can't wait for the Heisman campaign of Hollywood Smothers. All right, next game on the slate here, Syracuse versus Miami. It's a total of 153. I love how feisty you are tonight, Alex. Goes with the theme of the show. We got some new folks watching. Real good start here. Miami, a 1.5 point favorite. This is one where I feel uncomfortable either way. Like anytime Syracuse on the slate, I don't think they should ever be a favorite. Anytime Miami's on the slate, they should never be a favorite. But somebody obviously has to win this game. We can't just go without a winner. I do think Syracuse is live here to win. But only because this Miami team is so dreadful. I mean, all the OG coaches are basically, falling out here. The nature of the beast is so different now with having to recruit your own team the following year. So, Larinaga calling it quits, Leonard Hamilton calling it quits. From Indiana getting chased out, Mike Woodson. So, I mean, there's a lot of changes happening here. And Miami's just in a dreadful place since their final, their deep tournament run. Money bought that, and they did it before a lot of other programs, and now other programs are doing it. They've dealt with injuries. They've dealt with ineffectiveness. They've had to re-recruit their guys. They just haven't done as well. And there's no real excuse for Miami at this point because they have a war chest that's very deep when it comes to NIL. Miami is coming off a 10-point loss to Louisville. The starting lineup has shifted a myriad of times for Miami, so you never really know who's going to be in the starting five. Last game, they went with Matthew Cleveland. They've even benched him a couple of times. Lynn Kidd, Divine Ukachukwu, Brandon Johnson, and Jaleel Bethia. Bethia is a bit of a rug pull type play. He played 13 minutes. We've seen him start numerous games and then play under 20 minutes. Austin Schwartz ended up playing 25 off the bench, and AJ Staten McRae played 29. Paul Dishabet played 10, and Kyrie Huey played 5. All of them have had spot starts throughout. The kind of core four at this point that are going to get at least 25 or more minutes, typically Brandon Johnson, Matthew Cleveland, Lynn Kidd, and now a healthy Divine Ukachukwu. Looking at it, nobody really exciting, even though it is a Syracuse fantasy-friendly defense. Divine Ukachukwu is there at 4-5. Playing anywhere above 25 minutes makes him an appealing value option. You see he's right there, just under 20 fantasy points at those minutes, 4.38x. Definitely the top option here on Miami from a price standpoint. I do like Lynn Kidd. If he can stay out of foul trouble battling that Syracuse front court, I think he can have some really nice results there, only priced at a meager 6.5. Then you have Brandon Johnson at 6.2, who has upside at that price point, and a very expensive Matthew Cleveland at 8.6, who shouldn't be ruled out by any means. He's definitely a solid enough option. He has been, one of the lone bright spots, and this is a Syracuse program that he can do some serious damage against. So he's certainly a live GBP pay up if you want, but I don't think it's going to be real possible to get there in our main lineups, unless you're kind of making the decision not to play Broom, which we kind of strategically fade him when possible in likely blowouts. But Vanderbilt, who they're playing, is a little bit sneakier and a little bit better than I think most people realize. So it is a kind of a priority to get to him. Kidd at 6'5", again, I think he has some success here. Just pulled down 11 rebounds. It's a pretty good Louisville team. They don't have a lot of size like Syracuse does, but definitely like Kidd here, especially at home. And then Ukachukwu at 4'5". 3 straight games over 25 minutes. He was dealing with a hip issue mid-January, which caused him to miss a few games, but he seems to have shaken that off now. 3 straight games over 15 fantasy points. The Louisville game especially, 5 for 11 from the field, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, a couple of assists. He looked very, very solid. I think that for the rest of the season, they'll be giving him pretty heavy minutes, and as they should. There's no reason not to play Divine as a freshman, especially with that transfer portal looming. You don't want a guy to, kind of jettison out of there. He probably still will, but giving him as much PT as possible and as many opportunities as possible is going to go a long ways towards trying to keep him. His usage rate has started to climb above 20% now, especially in conference play. He has the 4th best field goal percentage on non-3-pointers. He actually does a really good job getting to the lane. Gets a lot of high percentage looks up there. Not the best three-point shooter just yet, but he is pretty gifted when it comes to driving to the basket. And in turn, he does a pretty decent job of drawing fouls. Now, he does have a 5.1 fouls called per 40 rate. Don't love seeing that, but he is, especially in the last 3 or 4 games, gotten into a ton of foul trouble. But they have been more competitive than some of their prior games. The 10-point loss to Louisville, the single-digit loss or win over Notre Dame, and then, a 11-point loss to Virginia. So they've been pretty close. They had an overtime loss to Cal, and a lot of that has been fouls later in the game. So I'm not as worried about that, but it is something notable there, especially for those that feel they're prone to getting bent over with foul trouble. That is one that you might want to look at 5.1 fouls per 40. So barring any craziness to the starting lineup, I will go him. And then a little Lynn Kidd exposure there. I do like Brandon Johnson here as well. I don't think he'll have much ownership at 6'2", so a little bit of a good value piece there with expected sub 5% ownership, capable of semi-breaking a slate. On the Syracuse side, J.J. Starling, the top at 7.7K. He has been absolutely dicing. The Orange have been without Donnie Freeman, the talented freshman, forever. After kind of, he's going to be questionable. He's practicing. Maybe he's going to be back. Kind of seemed like he was never going to be back. They did make the announcement just about 48 hours ago that he would be done for the rest of the season. The foot just not progressing. So he's going to have that surgery on it next week. And will be done for the season. So there's no more drama about Donnie Freeman. Will he be back? Will he not? Talented freshman. So we know he'll be back at the collegiate ranks. That means Jair Davis will get all the minutes he can handle continuously, and Eddie Lampkin is the top option in the front court, and he's gotten his price all the way up to 8K after some pretty damn good performances, which includes a 43.5 fantasy point game against Boston College most recently. 18 rebounds he pulled down in that one. Against Pitt a couple of weeks ago, he had a 23 rebound game. Against Cal, he had 10 rebounds. And even against Duke, it wasn't a great game for them. They got their doors blown off, but he still yanked down 8 rebounds. So Eddie Lampkin has been a solid front court performer for years at multiple stops. 8K is a pretty tough get, but I think against this Miami team, you'll be seeing him get a ton of rebounds. If he stays out of foul trouble, and Lynn Kidd especially gets into any kind of foul trouble, Eddie Lampkin is going to pull down a ton of rebounds. Lampkin rebounding props are going to definitely be something that we look at. Jair Davis, his price has kind of been stagnant here in this mid 5K range price point. That's just where they're going to have him. Saw in the overtime game against BC, 44 minutes. He is a trusted asset to this team. Definitely worth a look there. 5'4", 5'6", 5'8". That's a range you find a lot of last man in types. Like you're trying to fill that last utility spot. You have that amount of salary. That's the most common salary left. He's definitely a last man in type that I don't mind whatsoever. A little shout here to Petar Mastovjevic, the freshman center. He has been getting more and more minutes lately. BC game got a little bit wild. The pace in that one turned up, and it was a little bit too much for him. But in more physical games, he has been a very solid option. The Pittsburgh game, he played 23 minutes, probably one of his best as a collegiate player so far. 10 points, 5 rebounds. He's been hovering around that 18 to 20-minute mark. I do think we see him here against Miami get closer to that mark once again. And he's an interesting look at just 3.9K. Not somebody you'll use in your main lineup or what you put most of your action on. But if you're building out some alt lineups and you want some, 1% dart throws, Petar is somebody to definitely look at. And you see here at 19 minutes, he's pretty close to value with 14.2 points. I think he does have a shot at getting close to, 5X in this one, depending on how things shake out, especially if Lampkin were to get into any kind of foul trouble. When you look at the rest of the Syracuse lineup, they don't have a ton of – that's a triple overtime game, not just one overtime, by the way. They don't have a ton of other size. Naheem McLeod is 7'4". Yes, he's got size, but he barely plays, and there's a lot of ineffectiveness when he's on the floor, just meaning he doesn't have a lot of offensive game there. Obviously, he's a natural rim protector being that tall, but they just can't play him very many minutes. And outside of that, you've got Chris Bell, who hangs out on the perimeter. There's not a lot of size elsewhere. Jair Davis at this point playing the 4, and he's a little undersized himself at 6'6", 6'7". So I do think Petar plays more minutes here against Miami, and I do think he's a worthwhile option there for those of you who are building out multiple lineups. As far as the rest of this game goes, I think it really comes down to how much do you trust these teams to, because we know defensively they're terrible. We know that there's going to be plenty of opportunities offensively for both teams, but how trustworthy are they to actually perform? This is where Lampkin looks good at rebounding wise, because there's going to be a lot of bricks. We know that. But I don't know who is actually going to take advantage. Those that drive to the hoop are guys like J.J. Starling, Divine Ukechukwu. Those are the types that are going to excel in this game. I don't necessarily think the shooters, guys just kind of hanging around waiting for shots, are going to do quite as well. And that does make J.J. Starling an interesting look at 7-7. I think he'll go a little bit under-owned at that price. It's the most expensive he's been in roughly a month, close to a month. And I think a lot of people at this point have kind of written him off. And Syracuse has been, a doormat this year. So I don't know how many people are actually following them. So Starling does have a bit of juice there that I want some exposure to in all formats. All right, next game on the slate here, Utah versus Cincinnati. It's a total of 139. Cincy an 8.5-point favorite. Now, Cincy was just a pretty big favorite, relatively speaking, in their last game, which was against BYU. And they did take care of business at home, 84-66. And against UCF, they won 93-83. So 2 games in a row here. Wes Miller trying to get a respectable record on the Bearcats here so that he can be in line for that North Carolina gig. Because we know they like to keep it in the family, relatively speaking. And Hubert Davis, his days are numbered here, I think. It'd be I don't think anyone can deny that at this point. And it's a shame. I kind of thought he was going to get one more year regardless, but if they miss the tournament for, the second time in 3 years, that's rough. I don't know if you can keep him. But Wes Miller not exactly knocking them out of the park either. So Cincinnati needs to have a strong finish here. We know their non-con was full of cupcakes. They got high in the net ranking because they beat the doors off of those teams. They get into conference play, and the wheels fall off. Now, they have some great options here. Utah has been a fantasy-friendly group throughout. We definitely want to target against them. There are several options we can look at here. Excuse me. For those that are new, I am in the Pacific Northwest. I have a whole garage, office, studio in area, and right now it's hella cold, and so just trying to stay warm. Occasionally you see me turn around like that, just blowing the sniffles away there because the cold weather instantly makes me congested. So just want to throw that out there for those of you that new wondering what that's about. All right, Cincinnati-wise. This is a really solid look on several players. It's only 4.7K for Aziz Bandiago, who really hasn't been that appealing of an option to me much at all this season, but I admit he has been solid, especially when given minutes. The UCF game especially, he came through. That was a favorable matchup. He played 32 minutes in that game, 16-6, put up 31.5 fantasy points. BYU got a little bit more out of a hand. He still scored 9.6 rebounds. He contributed, but that price of 4.7, I mean, this is a player who at some points this season was closer to 7K. He has dealt with foul issues. He's dealt with ineffectiveness. He's had the minor injuries. Everybody at this point in the season has had those minor injuries, but this is a great, great spot to target Bandiago here. As long as he continues to start, there's been a few times where they experimented with the starting lineup, right, with Day Thomas and them. But I do like Aziz here quite a bit. Got to keep him out of foul trouble. But that price point of 4.7 is really appealing. And you'll see there on the board, he projects quite well if we give him about 25 minutes here. DVP filter is on. So this is accounting for the matchup against Utah. 21 fantasy points, right around 4.4. Definitely a look. Dan Skilling's name value at 4.6 is appealing, but he's been kind of banished from the starting lineup for now due to ineffectiveness. He did play 21 relatively solid minutes against BYU, so I don't hate the idea of using him. I mean, there's going to be a blow-up game for Skillings. He's too good not to. He did deal with some injuries as well, but he's been mostly ineffective. He was so good in the non-con, and I never thought of Skillings as a non-con hero because we've seen him compete against Power 5 teams before. We've seen it, but it just hasn't been really working out for him too much. So the move to the bench, probably for the best. He is more the GPP look. I'm more comfortable using Aziz as a main team look and then an alt build with Skillings because it's a buy low opportunity. You guys know that I love my buy low opportunities. And I think most people are just going to completely write Skillings off. It was only until the last 2 weeks of the season where he finally stopped projecting super him because his rates are still really good. And you see, even at 20 minutes at this price, he's just a tick under at 3.8x. And I'm still not comfortable, but the projections are factoring in how well he did in the non-con, of course. So it took a while for those bad games to kind of balance things out here. But he still projects pretty decently. So the upside is massive. And we know this column here is max. This is the most they've scored this season. He has put up 40 several times. So fully capable. Jizzle James, he's back to a reasonable price here of 6.5. He's been battling it out with Day Thomas. They've been kind of, one game Day's going off, one day Jizzle's going off. Day broke into the starting lineup and had an absolute monster game here. Started against West Virginia, 10-4-2, put up 25. Then he had the 20-point, 6-assist game against UCF for 36. Then he followed that up with 15-4-4 for 27 against BYU. That's caused his price to balloon up. Gone are the days right now of him being sub 5K, which were nice. I don't think we appreciated those days as much. But 6.7, it's a difficult price to get to, and you'll see the projections aren't super high on him, but the way he's playing right now, another favorable matchup, I think it's a mistake to completely write him off. I do think he's more viable, at least from a consistency standpoint, than Jizzle James. Less trust in James, even though he's put up 27 plus DK points in 3 of his last 4. His upside's obviously massive as well. I do think you want to consider strongly one of those two. I think one ends up on the optimal. This matchup is that good. Dylan Mitchell, he's reasonable at 6.4 as well. If you're not with the Aziz Bandiago play and you're just really not comfortable, or you want to go with a more balanced approach to the slate, which is totally possible and encouraged, Dylan Mitchell is going to be the look that you want to do there. He is probably the lone consistent play where you can sit on a game-to-game basis and say, yeah, that he's going to hit 4x at that price and have him hit it more often than not. The BYU game just got so far out of hand. They played a bunch of other guys. He only took 3 shots there. You see in competitive games, he's taken 14, 7, 9, a lot more involved there, and he's very, very good on the glass. He does lose a bit when Aziz is on the floor, but I think his price is cheap enough to definitely consider strongly if you don't want to go with the Aziz Bandiago route. Seamus Lukosius, he's a non-con hero. We don't need to look at him. And then we've seen the Josh Reeds, Tyler Betsy's, Arinton Page, Rayvon Griffith, all those guys get spot minutes here or there. CJ Frederick did return against UCF, played 13 minutes after he missed a week or two. Then he played another 12 against BYU. It's not enough to consider him, but it is enough to take from those other bench pieces that it makes all of them fairly irrelevant when you're making a main lineup. So Cincinnati side, James Thomas, one of them for sure. And then Dylan Mitchell, Aziz Bandiago, pricing difference there, but it comes down to comfortability. I suspect Aziz will have a pretty big spike in ownership because the matchup is relatively soft, and he's only 4.7. But that makes me a little bit more interested in a player like Dylan Mitchell, who has usually been chalk, but I don't think he will be on this slate. Utah side here, they come into this one 13-10. They play at a 94th fastest tempo. They like to push it. We've seen some, like I said, really fantasy-friendly games, and they've been winning a few games here or there. This is a very deep rotation, so you have to be cognizant of that. The starting 5 that we saw most recently in the last 2 games, Jake Wallen, Gabe Matson, Ezra Azor, Lawson Lovering, and Mike Travagems, the Mongolian Mike, as they like to call him. Off the bench, Keanu Dawes, my guy. Mason Madsen, Gabe's brother, Miro Little, Hunter Dickinson, or Erickson, not Hunter Dickinson. That would be crazy, right? And Zach Keller. We also, from time to time, seen Caleb Lohner, who playing some football there for Utah, has made his way through BYU, Baylor, and the like. He's also on this roster. He didn't play last game, but he's generally been playing 5 to 10 minutes. So it's a revolving door of 10 to 15-minute players in the front court. The highest upside play is Keanu Dawes. He has a bright future. Like, I'd be surprised if he stays. He's going to have a huge NIL collective, NIL collective coming his way. You see here, his rates are incredible. 24 minutes might be on the high end. He projects almost 5x with those. Last game, he played 21, so we can adjust that slightly. He's still a phenomenal play overall over value. Would like it better if he started. This game here is definitely one that I foresee him having to play more. Looking at his last 5, he's played 21, 15, 15, 30, and 19. I think he's cheap enough to use. The upside is great. I think a lot of people will overlook him to a degree just because, hey, this could be an Ezra Ozor game. Hey, maybe Lawson Lovering plays closer to 30 because he's doing well, or Zach Keller comes off the bench and has a big game. There's a lot of negatives that could possibly happen there. Definitely. Miro Little, for example, has all the upside in the world at this sub 4K price point, but it's hard to tell if he's going to play 5 minutes, which I have him here, or if he's going to play 26 minutes like he was playing earlier in the season, because if he was, and we knew that, he would be a supreme value, one of the best on the slate. But good luck trying to predict his minutes on a game-to-game basis. So Dawes, we know he's got the upside. He put up a high of 34 earlier this season. Wallen, he's definitely in play at 5'2" as the starter. He's been fairly solid as well. And then Mongolian Mike at 4'9", probably the top overall guard. He's also had a rug pull at minutes for his minutes quite a bit. I do think this is one he gets closer to 30, and anytime he's going to get that amount, he's definitely going to be an optimal play, or at least have the upside to do so. I am almost never on Gabe Madsen. I take his under props all the time, and I just never really look to Lawson Lovering anymore. When Lovering was near min price, I did. I know he's cheap at 5K, but he hasn't shown me a whole lot here. He did have a 27 against Colorado, but for the most part, he's struggling to reach double-digit fantasy points, and that just has to do with the fact that they're going 10-11 deep, and it's really making it difficult. You need guys, if you're taking on Utah, that can put up fantasy points in a hurry or have that fantasy point per minute number very sky high, such as Keanu Dawes or Mongolian Mike. Those are where you want to look. GPP-wise, Ezra Ozor, probably the highest upside on the team, but he is the most expensive at 6'3" as well, so go figure. All right, let's move it along here. DraftKings and Prize Picks props, I got you, man. If you stick around till the end here, we'll get through these game by games, and then I'll have a few to check out if you are interested. All right, next game on the slate here, BYU versus West Virginia. It's a total of 136.5. West Virginia is a 3-point favorite. Got to admit, this is a game that I don't have a lot of interest in whatsoever. BYU has turned into a really ugly DFS team. Their games are really not too enjoyable, and we've seen a lot of failure to reach 3x. They do have the 17th best offensive efficiency, so they do have a capability on offense, and they've been efficient. Top 50 in 3-point shooting, top 10 in 2-point percentage. But they have some games where they just look atrocious. That Cincinnati game, for example, they didn't look too good against Arizona. They had a rough one against Utah a while back. West Virginia themselves, they're a way better defense than most people probably realize under Darian DeVries. They're 17th in defensive efficiency, and they have really done a nice job of slowing things up and mucking games up, keeping them lower scoring. That is to their benefit. They're 331st in tempo right now. That is near the bottom of all of college basketball. So this is a team that is perfectly fine with being slow. There is one player on BYU that I do like. It's Mawat Mag. More of a, hey, he did us right in the past, so I kind of like him here. He has been playing starter minutes. He's only 3.9K. I have him projected for roughly 26 minutes here in this spot. He's just not immune, but he's been the least likely to lose minutes due to the deeper BYU rotation as their guys have gotten healthy, because BYU has dealt with injuries to just about every player on the team. This is one of the few times this season where I believe they have everyone available. So we've seen minutes lost to Kaida, Traore, Trevin Nell, Richie Saunders, all of these guys have lost minutes. Dawson Baker, but Mag has mostly been immune to that, and to a degree, Richie Sanders. However, against Cincinnati, with it getting out of hand there, he only played 14 minutes. He was truly ineffective. That has caused the steep price drop, which he was just at 5K last week. You saw the game against UCF, which is always a fantasy-friendly game. That's our one of our favorite teams, brand favorites. He had a monster game at like 5% for us. This was a night slate, 28 minutes there, 19 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds. Shows you what kind of upside he has. That might look like a blip because around it, he has 3 single-digit performances and 113. So he hasn't necessarily been great in conference play, but he has shown flashes. He had a game earlier this year against Texas Tech, 11 points, 5 rebounds. That was good for 21. And against TCU, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, a block. That gives good enough for 15. So I'm happy with 15 to 16 at 3.9 because, again, say it with me, class, it's less about what he does with his score and more about what he enables us to do. But I do think he has upside here. Even though it's a ugly game against West Virginia, I think he can thrive here. I think he can get some rebounds. Mag is a Rutgers transfer, not somebody that most people talk about, look at, or consider any kind of game breaker. But he's got some pretty solid overall rebounding rates, pretty effective in short spurts, shooting about 35% from long range. He has a steal rate over 2%. He has a block rate just over 2%, and he's drawing about 3 fouls per 40. But in conference play, he has been much more of an asset. He just jumped in the starting lineup back on January 14th after coming off the bench for most of it, and he had a bunch of DMPs in December as well, which were dragging down his overall numbers. So when you cut it down to just January and this part of February, he's been a much better play. Shot rate, usage rate, rebounding rate, all of that stuff have gone up. And he's been especially efficient inside the arc, where he's shooting 65%, which is 9th best in the Big 12 to this point. So Mag is a guy that I'm definitely buying as a value piece and presenting him to you. Not on Igor Demin, who we've had in the past. He's a decent price at 6.6. Fousseyni Traore has incredible rates and fantasy point per minute numbers, but he's been kind of, I don't know, lack of a better term, very good in conference play, which is why his price is all the way down at 4.3. You have Akaida, same thing. He has incredible overall rates there at 5.1. He's actually a pretty decent look. He should benefit here too, rebounds wise, shot blocking against this West Virginia team. He's kind of a more physical player, so that helps him. But those would be the 2 looks, Mag and Kaida. On the West Virginia side, you do have to pay up in Javon Small. He's there at 9.8. He's fairly matchup proof at this point. So if you find yourself going in that direction, I don't hate it. He's definitely been good each and every slate. Guy that has a floor of 35, 36, can't go wrong there. Amani Hansberry's price has gone up again since going into the starting lineup. He's there at 6K. Typically on West Virginia slates, he's the guy that we want to look at. But because he's been so good here recently, that's caused his price to shoot up from sub 5K up to 6K. 30 minutes against Utah, 17-7. It's the second time in his last 3 that he's surpassed 25 fantasy points. I think he has a chance to do it here against BYU, but he is at 6K. And that's just going to be a harder price, I think, for us to get to in a really ugly game. It's one thing to take a cheap guy in a game like this. It's a completely other to pay up 6K plus and possibly have a lot of missed shots. I don't know if he gets enough rebounds, other stats to really make up for it at this price. If he's still 4.9 or even 5.5, get a little bit off, I think we could certainly consider him. But at 6K kind of falls to a secondary play for me. Johnny Powell had a big game against Utah finally. He plays all the minutes in the world. He's a freshman, 4.8. He's definitely in play. If he can get hot like he did against Utah, he can definitely pay off. He's also been rebounding really well lately, 4+ rebounds in 3 straight, which includes 7 in their last game. Just plays every single minute possible. He's gotten to learn. It's been a real benefit for him because of injuries at key positions that West Virginia has had since day one. It's allowed Powell to basically just learn on the job as a freshman and overcome the freshman wall. The freshman wall that Ian Jackson of North Carolina is going through right now, Powell's just played through it. And perhaps I've been waiting for him to break through and really just kind of start to emerge because you can see the talent there. Maybe that Utah game is his wake-up call and we see him break through. So there's some interest there for me on John Powell. Not using him in my main lineup yet, but he's definitely an option. All right, let's move on to the next game here. We have Iowa State versus UCF. Now, for those of you that are new to the program, yes, I said program, I got a lot of catchphrases. I watched wrestling in the 90s, Raw is war, and, the Attitude Era. So I'm all about the catchphrase thing. And I have I talk about this mysterious book that's my rules to live by for DFS and betting. And I have, rule number 3,881, don't roster players who usually start but aren't starting today. Rule number 482, don't roster players who just aren't good. The list goes on. So I'm telling you this because I have a thing I say pretty much every slate if one of these teams is on it, and if you're a regular of the show and you become a regular show, you'll be able to say it with me. But there are 4 teams that we will stack for and against every time they're on the slate. That is Iowa, very fantasy friendly, and they can't defend. Kamari McGee of Wisconsin told us that, and he was right. Kentucky, they played extremely up tempo, and their games are just because they're so high scoring. So that one's obvious. ASU, which was just on the slate, they are down to 6 players. They don't defend very well. And typically you can stack half their starting lineup and the other side as well and end up with a 220 just with 7 guys from their games. I've done it. And then the other is UCF, which happens to be playing here against Iowa State. I absolutely love UCF. UCF is a team that has been very, very good to us in the FTN community. We have, let's do this. Okay. We have been the only ones rostering UCF guys pretty much on a every slate basis. The last UCF slate, we did see a spike in ownership for guys like Darius Johnson and Keyshawn Hall. But for the most part, those guys are never rostered. Key Hall is the quote unquote big guard that the media has been calling him. He puts huge games on the board, and they don't defend very well. They're involved in some really high scoring fantasy friendly games. And even when their games aren't high scoring, there just is a way for 3 or 4 players from their games to end up optimal or near optimal. So with that out of the way, we certainly want to get some exposure here to Iowa State. We typically don't like to target against Iowa State. They're not to the last couple of year Virginia team that played slow and is elite defensively. They're not to the Houston level, sand short slates. We don't really like to target against Houston very often. You would have had to today with some Baylor guys, but that's not something we like to do. Iowa State's close, but they're not there. So we don't have to avoid against them. I know that nobody's going to roster UCF on this slate. So that gives us an idea that, hey, there's some nice leverage here if we believe that they're going to compete and produce. And on the Iowa State side, they do have Milan Momklevovich back and Curtis Jones back to the bench. So that's going to cause some confusion against the masses, and they're going to be a little bit nervous about how's this rotation actually going to shake out. Only a 7.5 point spread, so that's relatively close. Cyclones on the road. They've had some pretty porous results here recently. They've hit a bit of a cold streak. And we said this is okay. If you get cold early February, that's a lot better than getting cold early March, late February, mid-March, right before Selection Sunday. If you're going to get cold, do it now. So they shook off a 3-game losing streak. They beat TCU, beat the brakes off them, in fact, 82-52 after a pretty embarrassing loss on the road to Kansas, a very embarrassing loss at home to Kansas State, and then the overtime loss to Arizona, which I feel must have gutted them in a way that they just had no energy, because that home loss, 80-61 to Kansas State, completely inexcusable for a team most people think has Final Four capabilities, myself included. So looking at the TCU game, Curtis Jones moved back to the bench. We saw Milan move right in the starting lineup immediately. He played 22 minutes. He hit 4 threes. That's what he's there to do. 14 rail points, 2 rebounds, 2 steals. It was a solid game for Milan. He is a tremendous shooter, a 3-point specialist, and he makes this team so much better because It opens up the painted area, and it gives them a kind of a knockdown, consistent shooter. Curtis Jones is a volume scorer. Keyshawn Gilbert can volume score when he needs to as well. And Tamim Lipsey can do a little bit of that. But efficiency-wise, none of those guys can really be counted on in that regard. Milan can. And Milan being back helps Curtis Jones because it takes some of that scoring pressure off of him and allows him to really focus on that area of his game instead of having to do other things. Curtis came off the bench against TCU, played 28 minutes. He immediately scored 24 points. Hit 5 threes, got to the foul line 7 times, had a rebound and assist. Not a lot of peripherals from Curtis, so we don't get that as much, but he had been the sixth man for Iowa State for a long time prior to the Milan injury. He is still expensive at 8.7, so he's priced up there. You'll see he failed to score above 20 points in each of the last 3 games prior to Milan coming back, coinciding with their losing streak. He shot 1 of 11 against Arizona, 4 of 15 against K-State, and 3 of 11 against Kansas. Off the bench against TCU, 7 of 11 from field, 5 of 6 from downtown. So we'll wait to see if his price can drop down. This UCF matchup is obviously great. I think Curtis Jones is easily the best GPP play on the entire slate. I'm very tempted to just use him in my main build as well, but it's just a little bit of a price up area there. If he's only going to play 28 to 30 minutes, he was efficient there. Like I said, typically we need him to see volume, but I don't like the fact that he just did really nothing peripherals wise. So it's a little bit of a tricky spot for me. I love Curtis Jones. I think he's going to light it up. He's going to put up a lot of points. Maybe we take his point prop, but as a DFS play, I'm a little bit leery there. Tamim Lipsey is spendy at 7K. He had, during that streak when Gilbert was struggling, Jones was struggling, Lipsey really stepped up. And that's why he's no longer priced at 5K. But you've seen the last 2 games, 14 and 13 fantasy points. That scares the shit out of me. I think we need his price to drop down considerably. He's been mostly a defensive stopper this season. He had to step up offensively because of that slump that everybody else was in. But you've seen the last 2 games taking on more of a secondary scorer role. So Lipsey kind of off the table for me too at that price. But he's in play simply because it's UCF, but I think we can do a little bit better price-wise. Keyshawn Gilbert, I think, is the play there for me at 7.6K. We haven't really gone back to Gilbert in a while. Earlier in the season, he was kind of our go-to option from this team, and then Curtis Jones off the bench is scoring more. He became our go-to option. When Gilbert was priced above him, it was easy to go Curtis. When Curtis is priced above Gilbert, kind of feels easy here. Let's take the discount with Keyshawn Gilbert. 7.6, reasonable price. He's been 9K for the past 3 weeks. I'll take that discount in a spot here against UCF. Yes, his last 5 games haven't been great either, but that is why we're getting the price dip and we're getting a semi-buy low opportunity. And the nice thing for Keyshawn, he has a great assist rate. He rebounds a little bit. He can score a little bit. This is the type of game where we could see him score 12, have 5-6 assists, get a couple of steals. Honestly, could have more, a couple of rebounds, a couple of threes, and suddenly, we're at 30, 35 fantasy points, feeling pretty damn good about ourselves. Matchup-wise, it's just a really good spot. You see here at 34 minutes, we have him right around 31 fantasy points, and I do think he has the upside for more. In the interior, Mo TM on UCF is a load. He can block a lot of shots, but you can definitely score down low on them. Josh Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson are at least interesting looks here. Both having really good rebounding rates. Jefferson's a bit spendy at 9K. That'll keep his ownership down. I definitely want exposure. And then you do get a semi-discount on Deshaun Jackson down there at 5.3. He's looked a lot better here lately, too. It's funny, the cold streak they were on, Jackson and Lipsey, who have struggled a lot this year, look really good. And their main pieces, Jefferson, Gilbert, and Jones, didn't look so good. So I think we'll see a little bit of the script flipping there, but I do still like Deshaun Jackson to a degree. And then Milan Momkovic at 4.7, back from the month-long injury, 9 shots immediately. That's what he's out there to do at 4.7. I'm fine with his lack of peripherals. If he's going to come out there and take 9 to 10 shots, and this is a spot against UCF, he definitely can do that. I do want some Milan exposure here. So Gilbert and Milan are the 2 on the Iowa State side that I would be prioritizing. Will I play them together? Probably, because I tend to stack UCF games. It's a large slate of 11 games, and Kentucky, one of our core 4 teams, is on the slate playing Tennessee. But I'm definitely going to be involved heavily on the Cyclones. No brainer there for me. On the UCF side, it is a little tougher. prices are high on the key pieces. Keyshawn Hall there at 9.3. We can expect a really, really minuscule ownership on him this slate. You look at it, I do some manual adjustments there, have him right around 3.6. He's just going to be out there a lot. If he doesn't get into any kind of foul trouble, he operates like as the go-to everything for this team. They call him the big guard. I'm really impressed with the way he's playing. I kind of feel like he deserves a spot on one of the, maybe not the first team all conference, but second team all conference for sure. 26.3% shot rate, 27% usage rate, a 17% defensive rebounding rate. He draws 6 fouls per 40, which is top 75 in the country, 38% from long range, 83% at the foul line. Absolutely love the way Keyshawn plays. He does get a little bit aggressive. We've seen the elevated fouls here lately, and that has cost him some minutes, but he puts up a ton in a short amount of time. He had just the 27 minutes against Baylor, still got to 31. Against BYU, I think he played like 8 minutes in the first half, played 27 overall, still got to almost 40 fantasy points against them, 28-3. And then you see in the games where he plays, 38 or more, like against Kansas, 39 minutes, he put up 50. 34 minutes against TCU, put up 44. 34 minutes against ASU, 59. 35 minutes against Arizona, 42. So you get the point. If he gets the minutes, he's going to bring us the ham and cheese. He's guard forward eligible as well, so you have some flexibility in your lineups there. It remains unconventional, but that's how I am. When you look at the pay-ups from, let's stay at 9K above, so starting at Josh Jefferson, ending at Janai Broome, obviously Broome and Smith, if you can get to one of those, you want to, but the rest of these pay-ups, and I know I said like Danny Wolf in the Michigan game, but the rest of these pay-ups all are clearly, for me, behind Keyshawn Hall. I think that he does damage here against Iowa State, and it's amazing to me that people at this point haven't caught on to that. Now, I say that if he has a bound game, you can give me shit, whatever, but he's definitely a top option for me, and I will have a lot of exposure. I also like Darius Johnson at 7.9. He's getting up there in price to where we have to really start to pump the brakes on him, though. When he was down low 7K, he was a bit of a sneakier look. He's been having some really good games, so he's nice because he fills it up in all categories. Definitely has a turnover issue because the ball's in his hand so much. Secondary look for UCF. Mo Tiem's price has gone up extremely high now. He's been super consistent since he shook off a minor injury. Elite shot blocking rate, elite rebounding rate, fouls, obviously the name of the game there with him too. It's really going to be important here because the front courts are capable of taking advantage of each other once they get the other into foul trouble. So it's Tiem Hall versus Jackson Jefferson. Sounds like a music group or a law firm, I guess. But I do have a sneaky suspicion that TM has a bit of a down game here. Just trying to go toe-to-toe there with Jefferson and Jackson. I think it's going to cost Jackson and Jefferson some minutes too, but that's going to be a new, mutual thing that happens. So I'm going to be lower on those guys as well. Jordan Ivy Curry is okay at 6'2". You still have a bunch of injuries, guys banged up, dealing with the flu. They play J.J. Taylor, Benny Williams, Mikey Williams, Dior Johnson, all the names of high school prodigies, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. No real plays there. But Dallin, Debo, Coleman, probably your top value piece from the UCF side at 4.7. High steal rate, pretty decent rebounding rate for a guy his size, and he can score a little bit as well. So I have some interest there. He's been getting a ton of minutes, but he's also dealing with fouls. The foul rate on the UCF squad as a team has been elevated the last couple of games. So that's something to watch out for as well. They play extremely aggressive, though, in a fantasy-friendly style that just generates a lot of points at the line naturally. So last UCF game, I said, hey, you got to have 3 players from it. If you don't, I don't know what you're doing. That was when they played Baylor. Lots of fantasy goodness on both sides. I don't necessarily think you need to have 3 from this game, but UCF games have treated us right. For me, Keyshawn Hall, pretty much the lone UCF player that we can use in our mains this time going up against Iowa State. But Milan, Momo, and Keyshawn Gilbert on the other side, I'm fine stacking them. So if that's the 3 that or if you go with a 3-man stack, those are the 3 that I would advise. alt team exposure to Curtis Jones, Darius Johnson, Dallin Coleman, players like that. All right, next game on the slate here, Tennessee versus Kentucky. The Vols come in as, 2.5 point favorites. It's a total of 149.5. 3 or 4 hours ago, we did get some news. Kentucky's been pumping out the news here throughout the day and pretty much throughout the weekend as well. We've had Lamont Butler in and out of the lineup. We've had some other injuries. Butler has an official questionable tag here, but he did play in that South Carolina game, 23 minutes. Wasn't bad. He's been out for a couple of weeks, but he is considered more probable than doubtful. So we'll see what happens there, but I would expect him to play. And then Jackson Robinson, who was first, doubtful on Sunday, then he became probable this morning. And then a couple of hours ago, he was moved to out. So there is no Jackson Robinson. That's about 27, 28 minutes to go around to other players. That means Kobe Brea will be back in the mix. He came off the bench against South Carolina, but he did still play 30 minutes. Expect him to slide back in the starting lineup with Jackson Robinson out. He's there at 5'6", not quite the value that he was earlier when these guys started going down, but still very much worth a look. The Vols, not necessarily the team that we want to target against very often, but on the road, they're not quite as scary as they are at home. Otega Awe is an affordable 7.8K, dropping from 8.4, one of the higher usage guys on the team, takes a ton of shots, their go-to scorer at this point. Amari Williams will have his work cut out for him. He's been playing extremely well, which has caused his price to skyrocket. I think I need to see that come down a little bit more just because his minutes tend to be capped right around 24, 25. But he's been playing extremely well, and it will need to in this one. We do have the value in Andrew Carr. We're waiting for him to start, and he didn't start against South Carolina. It was still Ainsley Almanor. Carr had a monster first half, like 9 points, 2 rebounds. Can't remember if he got his block or not, but he was like over 12 fantasy points in the blink of an eye. And it was like, that was a play value-wise that we were really high on that day. We ended up swapping because some other value materialized, but the rest of the industry didn't. He still was 35, 40% owned. And it was like, damn, we're going to be kicking ourselves here. He's halfway to value in the first half, like shit. But he ended up in major foul trouble, picked up 4 fouls, only played 14 minutes. The game got out of hand as well. So that didn't work out too well. Combination of the blowout and the fouls. Andrew Carr is very much back in play. I said at last Kentucky slate that I think he'll start over Almanor. It didn't happen. I think it's pretty close to happening at this point. And even if it's not, I foresee him getting close to 20 minutes, barring any foul issues. So sub 5K for a player like Andrew Carr, who routinely put up 30, 35 fantasy points a game at Wake Forest last year. Definitely a guy that we want to have some exposure here too. They just played Tennessee on the 28th, and it was a close game, which they won on their floor 78-73. Carr only played a minute in that game because he's coming back from injury, but I expect him to be much more of a factor this time. And you can see here there's some just okay projections because of the DVP against the Vols not being great, but Brea, Awe, and Carr are definitely options. I'm not stacking Kentucky, and I know that's one of those teams we want to stack for and against when they're on the slate, but we have to be sensible here, and the Vols are not necessarily a team that we want to be stacking against too often. Let's pull up the box score for that last one so we can see how that played out. That was a pretty tough loss for them. I don't think anyone was expecting that one. Kobe Brea had 18 in that one, 15 rebounds for Amari Williams. Jackson Robinson had 1,000,003, scored 17 points, and Otega Awe had 14 and 6. The Vol side there, 6 assists for Zakai Zeigler and 13 points. Chaz Lanier had 15, and then Igor Milicic had 19 and 9. The bench was just okay for the Vols. They'll need to be much better than okay here against Kentucky. There is going to be a, plethora of options that we can look at here. I still think Zakai Zeigler, even at the elevated price of 8.9, is about as safe as it gets. You can see even at that price point, he's still pretty close to value, right around 3.5. He has always been a kind of a spotty shooter, but his peripherals make him a very solid look, and his floor is sky high because of it. We've frequently seen him eclipse 30 fantasy points without scoring more than 9 or 10 actual points. You key in the last couple of games here, the Missouri 85-81 victory and the Oklahoma 70-52 victory, he was red hot from long range. And we said there's only a matter of time. He's getting this major volume. He's not making shots. Something's going to flip here. When it does, you don't want to miss out. 4 of 4 from downtown against Missouri, 5 of 9 overall, 7 for 7 at the line. He scored 21 real points, 38 fantasy points, and then the blowout win over Oklahoma, 17 points, 9 assists, 4 steals, hit 3 of 4 from downtown, 6 of 8 from the field. Efficiency right there. He only shot 4 of 15 against Auburn, 5 of 18 against Kentucky last time they played. Both of those games, he sailed over 30. Like, he's just a way safer player that just people don't roster and just don't talk about enough. Yes, he's been better at home for Adam, one of our community members that's so high on the splits. But Zakai Zeigler is just, he's in his zone right now, and I definitely want to continue to have exposure there. In Kentucky, they've been popped in the mouth a little bit, and they're susceptible. And these continual injuries to key positions, they're not helping one bit. Igor Milicic projects pretty dang well, over 4x. Last time out, the 19-9 game against Kentucky, that yes, it was at home, and he did have some foul issues that he was able to overcome, played 31 minutes. He put up a 38. Followed that up with a 54, which was 21, 10, 5, and 4 blocks with 2 steals against Missouri. So Igor is, shook off the illness, shook off the minor injury he had. He's playing extremely well right now. Wasn't needed as much in the blowout against Oklahoma. He will be needed to replicate the production he had against Kentucky. Igor and Amari Williams both went off against each other in this last matchup, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out this time. We do have a questionable tag on Felix Okpara. As of this evening, a couple hours ago, he has been moved to more probable, so we'll see what happens there. Don't know the actual injury that he's having, but clearly probably not as big of a deal there if he's expected to play. He's been a really solid piece for them, rebounding and shot blocker. Not needed for his scoring, but he's been a welcome addition for this Vols team. He's not really a playable DFS option at 6'2", but if he were to sit out, that is 25-ish minutes to go around to other spots, would open up some value for us. So we'll keep an eye on that. Chaz Lanier, the secondary, he's not the alpha as Zeigler is, but he's definitely the, closer to Dalton Connect than anyone else on this team as far as a volume scorer. When you need a bucket, a guy that can go get it. He had a bit of a down period there where he was just not really a usable fantasy asset. Price of 7.2 is fair. He has gotten hot again. 9 of 17 against Oklahoma, 6 of 14 against Florida. He's just been, kind of torching the nets here. He was not as good against Missouri. Only took 7 shots, but he did still manage 20 fantasy points because he is contributing on a peripheral standpoint, which is a welcome change for him. So not just reliant upon his scoring. The Lanier versus Milicic, yes, they play different positions, but they're always priced around each other. And all season long, it feels like it's been, which one do we play between those two? And that's been a tougher one to peg on a game-to-game basis. But I would say Igor over Lanier this time, but it can very easily flip the other way. Your secondary pieces and cheaper, Jordan Gainey at 5'6", Jemai Mashak, whose value at 4.5, playing starter level minutes, 25 to 30. Really had that game against Florida, 8 and 4 for 30 fantasy points, but they were missing 2 key pieces. Player to look at if Okpara were to be out, Cade Phillips. He did play 21 minutes because of the blowout over Oklahoma. He has scored 15 plus fantasy points in 3 straight games as well. They got their doors blown off, they blew the doors off of Florida. Both teams had injuries. 28 minutes for Cade in that one, 13 against Missouri. The minutes have been elevated. They are definitely using him more. It's something to watch there. If Okpara is any kind of limited there, I would want some exposure to Cade Phillips at 4.1. And then you have Darlington Dubar. Near min price. He had the big game against Florida because of the injuries at guard. They did play him 11 minutes against Oklahoma. He's just not the Hofstra version of himself. He's dealt with a ton of injuries himself. But at near min price, he's always worth a shot there in GPPs. All right, let's go on to the next game here. Florida versus Mississippi State. A total of 152. Florida is a 1.5 point favorites. I've been, hyping the Mississippi State train up a ton. that is a team that I do still really like. Every time I kind of feel like I might be their kiss of death, because every time I talk about this being a sneaky tournament squad, they drop another game. So I hope I'm not the curse of Mississippi State. Still a solid record, 17-6 under Chris Jans, top 50 in defensive efficiency, top 20 in offensive efficiency, a really elite offensive rebounding team. They do a lot of things well, but they needed that Georgia win. They got the 76-75 win. That kind of stopped the bleeding for now. Now a tough matchup against Florida, albeit it is at home, so at least gives them a slight advantage here. Let's take a look at their side first. It is the revenge narrative for Riley Kugel, priced there at 4.6. He is one of those players I can, sit here and tell you, yeah, Kugel at that price can absolutely knock it out of the park. But this is a really tough one because his minutes projection is another one of those players that gets wielded in a very peculiar way, similar to Malik Dia. Sometimes we'll see him play 30 minutes. Sometimes we'll see him play 12 minutes. And yes, there's some foul stuff and some, other ineffectiveness. But for the most part, there's not a big rhyme or reason for why that happens. And that has made it very difficult to peg when it's time to play Riley Kugel. He is cheap enough to look at. Yes, he'll have some added pep in his step playing against Florida. Transferred out of there, was going to head to Kansas, then decided to bounce from there when they got AJ Storr and found himself at Mississippi State. Not a starter, but a game against Florida, they're going to definitely need his scoring. I do think he gets closer to 25 minutes than under that this time, so that makes him an appealing look for sure. The starting lineup is steady for Mississippi State. Usually Josh Hubbard, Cam Matthews, Waddell Harris, RJ Melendez, and Michael Nwoko. But we see Kugel off the bench playing a bunch, and then Keyshawn Murphy, who's arguably the best player on this team and the sixth man. Elite rates across the board, and this is a matchup they're going to need him to come up huge against this Florida front court. He's priced at 7.3, a bench piece that's a little bit tough for people to click his name in. He's an elite GPP look because of his high upside. And again, they're going to need his size against this front court. We've seen his minutes popping up there. 27 against Bama, 30 against Georgia, 25 against South Carolina. So he's been playing more off the bench, and he is quite honestly the best player on the floor when he is. Josh Hubbard's out there scoring, making things happen, but Murphy is a truly complete player that is very, very dangerous. Speaking of Hubbard, his price is there at 7.8. He woke up. He's been sleepwalking this year. We say the volume's still there, but we had been waiting for that to happen. Alabama, 28 shot attempts, nearly single-handedly beat Bama on his own, 38 real points. Then he followed that up against Missouri. They got blown out. They were a little gassed from the Bama game, I suppose. 24 real points for him there. And then against Georgia in the win, 16 real. But he had 6 assists in that one, had a more willingness to pass, which was nice to see. But all that ham that he's provided has created a situation where he's priced up to nearly 8K now. So if you weren't rostering Hubbard at 6K, you don't think you could start here at almost 8. Murphy for sure. Cam Matthews, who has been essentially written off by the masses, but has incredible peripheral stats, doesn't need a score. 27 fantasy points while scoring 4 real. That just shows you everything about Cam Matthews. If he has one of those games where he is scoring, like was the Kentucky game back in early January, he had 19 and 10, put up a 50 because he's always racking up steals. He's always racking up blocks. I like Cam Matthews the way he plays, but his lack of scoring can obviously be a problem. After Kugel, you have Waddell Harris, who typically starts. They've been splitting their time. There was a once upon a time where Waddell was playing 30-plus minutes. Now he's kind of in that mid-20s range because he and Kugel are basically splitting. If one's hotter than the other, we'll see a slight deviation from that, but that's the kind of the expectation that I have. I do like Nwoko as a cheapie at 4.5. He's been extremely efficient, but his minutes are stuck because Murphy's so good off the bench. Nwoko is the victim to that, and he ends up playing about 18 minutes max off the bench. RJ Melendez is cheap at 4.4. He's failed to reach 20 minutes in 3 straight games, though, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that, yes, Kugel and Waddell are splitting, but now Melendez is losing time to Sean Jones. And then there's been times where Murphy and Nwoko have been out there together, not as much. But we've seen Sean Jones off the bench playing some pretty big minutes here recently. So Melendez is value. If he plays the minutes he's seen earlier in the year, he was playing 28, 29. If he's playing those kind of minutes, he's obviously one of the top values on the slate, as you can see there. But playing what he's played in the last 3 or 4, 19 to 20, he's a far less better play. So this is a very tough team to peg because the minutes are so drastically different for most of them, which throws everything off. So yes, not really cutting edge stuff for me to tell you. If he gets minutes, he's going to produce, but it's a really huge difference here between 19 to 29 minutes. Not as drastic for some players, but it is for somebody like RJ Melendez. It is for somebody like Riley Kugel. Sean Jones, for that matter, at 3.7. If he plays over 20 minutes, I do like him as well. All right, Florida, they have some injuries of their own. Who doesn't? Injuries are in vogue right now. In style, Elisha Martin, Alicia Keys, he is questionable, dealing with the hip issue. The situation here, he was expected to miss some time. Now they're talking about expected to play. And then the latest I saw from John Rothstein was that they weren't exactly sure if he was going to play. So it's another one of those, just like we're coming into the Houston game tonight. Oh, Manny Sharp is practicing. He looks like he could play. Then it started looking like he couldn't play. Then LJ Cryer had a very serious knuckle injury to his shooting hand. Sound doubtful. And then they both start and play. So I've been talking about this all season long, but the injuries that guys are coming back from so quickly, it's been really hard to peg that injury news. And it just speaks to, you need to be ready in the Discord, in the FTN CBB DFS Discord, ready for any and all news, because when it happens, you have a split second to really make a decision. Anyways, Martin missed their last game, a 90-81 win over Auburn. That was an impressive win for the Gators. I'm surprised, but they did it, and they held Broome in check for the most part. In check for Janai Broome. He still had a huge game, right, at 18 and 11 with 6 assists. But for him, that's a down game, which just speaks to how he should be the Naismith winner. I know Cooper Flagg's alive, but Janai Broome is the best player in college basketball. Anyhow, Walter Clayton was a monster in that one, played 40 minutes, 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 9 assists. I think that might have been the best game I've ever seen Walter Clayton play, and I've seen him play a lot of basketball over the course of his career, dating back to Iona his freshman season. Thoroughly impressed with the way that he put that on against Auburn. Alex Condon had 17 and 10. Will Richard had 12 and 5. We got 10 out of our man, Denzel Aberdeen, who's been a solid value piece. And then Thomas Ha off the bench. I'd been saying it Hoff. I did a little digging there. It's actually Ha, which I love, Thomas Ha. 28 minutes there, because Ruben Chignello, who starts, very foul prone, not as much of a threat offensively like Thomas Ha is. So Ha played 28 minutes, 16 points, 9 rebounds. He looked fantastic. This Gators team is tough. Injuries be damned. They're 20 and 3, and it's really seriously time to talk about the Gators as a legitimate squad fighting for not only a number 1 seed, but a real chance at making a drive to the Final Four and beyond. So we'll see what happens with Elijah Martin. If he's out again, that gives us Denzel Aberdeen, who's still really cheap on DraftKings at 4.2K. You've seen he's played 20-plus minutes in 4 straight, even when they didn't have injuries at his position. Price has come up a little bit, but it's just a really big no-brainer. If he starts, he's going to play 30-plus minutes. If there's no Martin, he's just a very easy value to me. So we'll track that news as it goes, but I have Martin probably a little under-projected here. If we zero out Martin, say 29 for Aberdeen. Yeah, easily one of the better values on the slate. Thomas Ha, he is getting more and more minutes. He's just fearless. If you haven't seen him play, try to watch this game. He's just cranking right now. 3 of his last 4 against likes of Auburn, Vanderbilt, and Georgia. He has been over 28 fantasy points. The Tennessee game, yes, it was a rough one for them, but he still put up 10 rebounds, 6 points, had an assist, was close to 20 fantasy points. They only scored 44. So he was still competitive and still honestly looked pretty good. Early in the non-con season, Thomas was absolutely just cracking other teams, lower end teams for sure. And then he kind of went into hibernation. The early part of SEC play, we didn't see him as much. And when he was on the floor, he was pretty invisible, and now he's making a huge stride back to playing like he was in the non-con. He is 6K. It's definitely a higher price, and if you haven't been using him over this stretch, I would probably tell you it's a bit tough to go there now. But I still want some exposure. The Mississippi State front court is the real deal, though, especially at home, and fouls are a big thing. However, it'll probably happen to Ruben Chinyello, and it'll probably happen to Alex Condon, which sets the stage for Thomas Haw to maybe come in there and play another 28 to 30 minutes. And if that's the case, 6K be damned, I think he still puts up a pretty big number. So definitely looking at him as well. Chinyello's down there at 3.8 as a starter, but tough to go there. And Sam Alexis, he was an interesting play there against Vanderbilt, but he's not getting enough minutes there at near mid price. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have Auburn versus Vanderbilt. It's a total of 156.5, relatively high total. Auburn is a 9-point favorite. Again, holding Janai Broome in check, and he's still putting up 40 plus. That just speaks to how good he is. Now, Vanderbilt, they've got some size. They've got a deceptively tough home court to play on. I don't like this spot for Auburn necessarily. I feel like Vandy's kind of a live to cover here at home, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable using some of the shooters or primary shooters for Auburn, guys that reliant on that, like Denver Jones shooting well, Miles Kelly, who had a pretty nice game last time out. Those are the plays that I think could struggle here. Chad Baker-Massara, he's dealt with major foul issues the last 3, and that's caused his production and his price to go down. So he still projects well because of how great he's done over the first 2 months of the season, but I think I'd be a little leery on him as well. Broome is 11K. It's a substantial amount of salary to pay up, but he has great rates across the board. You know that. He's an Naismith contender, and at 31 minutes, I have him projected for almost 50 fantasy points. That's just, I mean, how good he is. His high this year is 63.5. A down game is 40 in fantasy points. Like, find a way to get Broome. We have value. We've already brought up some value. I think you got to play Broome. If that means you got to sacrifice Braden Smith, who's been really good, then you got to sacrifice Braden Smith. I'm the first one to look for an excuse or a reason not to roster those top-end guys and go with a more balanced approach. That's my MO. It has been for a decade now. But on Broome slates, and especially in a matchup where a game might be competitive or semi-competitive, I just don't see fading Broome as very advantageous. The problem is you can get away with fading guys like Hunter Dickinson because they'll go long stretches of not putting up points while on the floor. Like, yeah, there'll be foul trouble, but you'll see Dickinson out there for 8 minutes, and he'll have 5 fantasy points only. You won't see Janai Broome on the floor for 8 minutes with a 5. That just doesn't happen. If he's on the floor for any amount of time, he's racking up points. He's grabbing every rebound. He's blocking every shot. He's hitting every shot he takes. He's getting some assists even. Like, there's just so much activity there for Janai Broome. It's just an uncomfortable fade. So I do advise playing him at 11K. I hate paying that price for anyone, but he's definitely warranting that. If you fade Broome, you almost have to play one of his teammates there as built-in leverage. Yes, Chad Baker is the natural alt play there over Broome, but I do think Todd Pettiford is somebody they could rely on in this game. He's been a decent shooter and scorer, but this is a Vandy team that I think in this spot will require a lot of drives and attacking, and I think Pettiford's perfect for that. So I think we could see some elevated minutes for him. You see at 24, he's just under 4X. I do think he's the second best Auburn play behind Janai Broome, over Kelly, over Denver Jones, over Chad Baker. As far as anyone else, Dylan Cardwell, they're okay, but that's not really my cup of tea. On the Vanderbilt side, we do have some guys who project pretty well. Jason Edwards, namely at 5'8", he just has some really strong rates across the board. He's become their top scorer. Coming into it, there were games, a ton the first month of the season. He started, then the second month he didn't start. Now he's back to being a starter and just the de facto go-to play. 20 real points against the Florida defense, 21 real points against the Oklahoma defense. Offensively, they've just been falling apart. 17 real against Texas. That win over Texas, 86-78, that was a pretty big one for Vandy. Texas had a really nice first half. Second half, Vandy just quieted them down. Literally Arthur Kaluma and Jordan Pope, both of which who basically made value, but they made value in the first half and did almost nothing in the second half. So kudos to Vandy and their staff because they made the necessary adjustments. 18 real against Kentucky, 21 real against Alabama, and 18 real against Tennessee. Also, 20 real against Missouri. So some pretty solid performances here in the conference play. His shot rate is up to 31.6%. It's fourth highest in the SEC. He also has the fourth highest usage rate in the SEC at 30%. Shoots about 38% from long range. Draws 6.1 fouls per 40, the third best mark in the SEC. And he has the 14th best free throw percentage at 84%. So Edwards can fill it up, and he can get himself to the line, and he can score in a multitude of ways. Auburn, defensively, yes, they're tough, but Jason Edwards is way underpriced here at 5'8", at home as well. Now, he doesn't get a lot of other stats, and that can be problematic, but that's why this sub 6K price puts him back into play, because he was over that for the last couple of weeks. You see against Texas, he scored 17 real, yes, but he did nothing else. Against Florida, he scored 20 real, yes, but he had 1 assist. So those big scoring games kind of fall by the wayside at the 6'7", 6'6" price that he was, because it's not quite making value. He's not giving us anything else. But below 6K, if he scores 20, 24 real, we can get to value, especially if he's hitting threes, and feel pretty good about it and not have to worry about that. But that's been the biggest issue with Jason Edwards. Smaller scale Cam Thomas for his freshman year, his lone year at LSU, where he would do nothing but score 30 real and give us no other peripheral stats. But Edwards at 5'8", obviously the go-to guy. We've seen some big games out of Jalen Carey, just put a 40 up on Texas. Going up against Auburn, this is a different animal for him. I would be extremely concerned with him being able to stay out of foul trouble. Broome is very good, one of the best in the front court at drawing fouls, and Carey has a foul rate nearly 5 per 40. So it would seem very likely he fails to stay on the floor. He is priced up at 5'8" as well, but that shows you what kind of upside Carey has and what he carries with him. Same with Devin McLaughlin. He was pretty high owned against Texas. He had a nice first half, but he also disappeared in the second half. But he did foul out in 25 minutes, and that's the second time in a row that he has fouled out in under 30 minutes. Won't get any easier against Auburn, regardless of being at home. So I would downgrade him as well. And I don't have a ton on the Vanderbilt values. Guys like Chris Mannion, MJ Collins, Tyler Tanner, who have projected pretty decently with their minutes, but they just haven't necessarily been all that advantageous from a DFS standpoint. And Mannion, regardless of starting, we've seen his minutes decrease, so it's really difficult to get there. Like right now, he auto-populated at 19 minutes. He's been playing way less than that. MJ Collins has gone back and forth between playing heavy minutes and not based on his scoring. We've seen him play around 22 to 23. He put up 22 against Texas because he can get hot very quickly. Tyler Nickel is an interesting price of 4.8. Played 30 minutes against Texas and was very good, 17 and 4. So there's some interesting pieces here on this Vanderbilt team, but they are a little bit deep for my liking, and I don't get in the habit of using guys against Auburn all that often. So for me, Jason Edwards, yes, I want to pay up for Janai Broome. If I'm fading Broome, I want some leverage there by taking one of his teammates. For me, that probably is Todd Pettiford. Yes, he's a little spendy at 5'7", but if you're fading Broome, you're going to need something to work out here that is exotic. And I think rostering Pettiford and hoping that he delivers you a 30-plus game is the way to go about doing that. Now, he hasn't done that very often, but he is a very gifted scorer, and I think he can take care of business. One thing I think happens is he takes a ton of free throws in this game, so we'll see how that pans out. Overall, in my main build, though, I'm absolutely going to play Janai Broome. Seems nonsensical to fade him. All right, UCLA versus Illinois is our next game. Total of 149.5. The Illini are 5.5-point favorites against the Bruins. The Bruins are handling themselves quite well. Yes, it's a home game for Illinois, but do we really think they're covering 5.5 against a Bruins team that will take your lunch money? I don't know. And especially with the foul problems that Illinois has, this one seems like it could be a disaster for the Illini. Starting with Illinois, we have to mention how these freshmen that they have, man, they're set up for the future and beyond. Obviously, the transfer portal will be a thing as well, but this Illinois team is stacked with youngsters. They absolutely spanked Minnesota 95-74. Any and all talk about the Gophers being a dark horse team ended when my Huskies beat them on their floor. What a glorious night that was. But yeah, they're starting 2 freshmen. They're playing significant minutes for 3 freshmen, 3 sophomore. They have the senior transfer in Ben Humrikus, who is just okay. And we've seen a few minutes here spot from Kylan Boswell. He's back in the starting lineup, played about 28. He's kind of hit or miss, we know. But Kasparis Jakujas, I like to call him Casper. As a freshman, we know he's been their best player. Tomislav Ivicevic, the 7-footer, the sophomore, he's back healthy. Mono is gone. Morris Johnson, who is a show favorite, has a foul issue, but when he's able to play big minutes, he has been as good as anyone. And then Will Riley, who's been playing off the bench, but he is suddenly looking like the best player, best freshman in the country, even over Cooper Flagg the last couple of games. Not for the whole season. I'm not crazy, but lately Will Riley's looked like one of the better freshmen, at least in the conference. 27 real points against Minnesota. 9 rebounds, 7 assists, like flirted with an actual triple-double. And that's not just a one-game blip. Against Rutgers, he had 18, 3, and 6. I mean, he is really playing well. He had 24 real points against Ohio State. Got to the foul line 12 times, 3 rebounds there and assists. 4 straight games, he scored 16 or more real points. His price has skyrocketed because of this production, so we may have missed the boat there. It's going to be real tough to justify a 7.6K or 7.6K price point for Will Riley. But when you look at the results, they speak for themselves. Against the likes of Nebraska, Ohio State, some tougher groups there. Obviously, Rutgers and Minnesota are pretty much cupcakes at this point. But UCLA will not be easy. He has benefited a great deal from all of the foul trouble that others are getting, and he's played 28-plus minutes in 4 straight games. Morris Johnson's price is starting to come down again because he's dealt with foul issues the last 2. That's just what happens to him. He's a great shot blocker. He's elite on the glass, like we saw against Ohio State when he pulled down 15 rebounds. Not too keen on using him here against UCLA, but let that price keep falling, and we will have a chance to strike with him once again. Trey White has missed the last couple, dealing with an illness. They had him in the box score logged as 30 seconds, but I'm pretty sure he didn't play at all last game, so I'm not sure what that was about. He has been practicing, so we'll see. With the emergence of Will Riley, Morris Johnson, they don't have to force Trey White out there. Even if he plays, I would have very little interest. Now, it is worth noting that because Trey White was sick, that type of thing with the norovirus, if that's what it is, that rips through a locker room, so you'll see other players being sick. Draw Gibbs Lawhorn is dealing with it as well. He ended up not starting against Minnesota and could only muster 4 minutes after starting the last couple of games due to some injuries and ineffectiveness of others. He has been practicing too, as far as I know. I think he'll play. I don't think he'll start. Really no justification for using him right now unless he is starting. And even if he starts, I think he's going to be hard-pressed to have that kind of production against UCLA. He's a younger player. His time will come. He's already shown flashes, but we don't need to get too cute by playing him or Will Riley in this matchup. I think I'm going to be pretty low on Illinois as a whole. And when you look at the way they project, nobody really stands out too heavily there, just because of the priced up that everybody is. On the UCLA side, we definitely have some intriguing options. For the most part, guys like Kobe Johnson and Eric Daly are priced about where they should be at this point. Tyler Bilodeau is slightly underpriced at 6'4". He did only play 20 minutes against Penn State, but that was because they absolutely destroyed Penn State 78-54. So he played reduced minutes. In a more competitive game like we saw against Michigan State, he played those 28 minutes, 13-4, put up 24. Against Oregon, 15-6-4. He's got an ankle issue that's been kind of flaring up here and there and costing him some games. But for the most part, in a competitive game like this, I would put him on at least 28 minutes. So that's where I have him right now, perhaps even more. Right now, he projects, just under 4x at 28 minutes. a little bit more. He's pretty close to value. That's a player that I'm definitely interested in at 6'4". Kobe Johnson, not as much. I think that price for him is a little too high. He goes through droughts scoring wise, and he does rack up a lot of steals and other peripheral stats, which prop up that number for him. But that's just a little bit uncomfortable price for me and not one that I'm willing to pay for him. Especially in this spot. We just had him at like low 6K not that long ago. Yes, he put up 52 against Penn State, which was 15 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals, and a partridge in a pear tree. But I'm not chasing that performance, and I don't think anybody else should either. Let that price come back down. Guard roulette for UCLA hasn't been fun whatsoever, and Kobe's definitely a part of that. You also have Sky Clark, who's there at 5'9", had his fair share of really good games and really down games. Sebastian Mack, who comes off the bench more often than not. He had 22 against Penn State in the blowout, but you'll see him randomly play just 10 in competitive games. When they need offense, they throw him out there and he does produce, but his minutes are all over the place. You just can't trust him anywhere. Yes, the price is nice on 4K, but you got to hope that you hit him on a day that he plays 25 plus minutes. And then you have Dylan Andrews, who is starting over Sebastian Mack right now, but his production has been down lately. Minutes there, but he's not scoring quite as much. And he's priced at 5K, which is just a little bit over where I'm comfortable playing him right now. So for me, Tyler Bilodeau is a safer look. I don't want to get involved in the UCLA guards too much because I'm not comfortable with their prices and Max not playing enough. I think Sky Clark at 5'9" does have merit in this spot. And then you have Adi Mara, who did really well in Bilodeau's absence, but he's been trending downward minutes-wise. He's still priced at a level that makes 0 sense to use him with a healthy Bilodeau and Daly, so can't really look there. But if foul issues happen on either side, Mara could be called upon there to play some additional time, especially if Daly gets in any kind of foul trouble. Eric Daly does have a pretty high foul rate, and that's been something we struggled with early on with him when rostering him as a main team play. All right, next game on the slate here, Arizona versus Kansas State. Total of 150.5. There's a lot of high totals on this slate, over 150 points. Might be a high-scoring one. Then again, landmines might keep it lower. Arizona's a 3-point favorite here against K-State. K-State, this is a very obvious betting spot for Arizona. How obvious is it? Well, very obvious. I think -3 is a slam dunk play. Kansas State had a victory. They were at home, but the victory over Kansas, 81-73, frankly, a game that they really should have had no business winning. They had no answer for Hunter Dickinson. Zeke Mayo was his normal dominant self. Coleman Hawkins turned it over a million times, but he had 5 blocks. But it was Doug McDaniel with 15 points, 6 rebounds, 11 assists, and David Ngason, who just continually scored on those little 2-point mid-range jumpers that he does. 20 and 7, and they just kind of slapped Kansas in the mouth and didn't look back. So I am going with the hangover angle here. When you look at Kansas State's immediate schedule, they have BYU on Saturday, which is a road game, and then Utah on Monday. So, kind of a condensed schedule there, playing in the state of Utah. I think this is a very vulnerable spot for them against Arizona. Ken Pom has it 78-73, but I'm all over Arizona in this spot. I don't give Kansas State really any hope of winning this game. Obviously competitive to a degree, but that hangover spot is going to be true because they didn't have any business beating Kansas. But Kansas is obviously not a dominant Jayhawks program that we're accustomed to seeing right now. So I'll go quick because it is getting late. Kansas State, I like to use them against the ASUs of the world. Tougher matchups like this, I'm not too keen on them. It is worth looking at Doug McDaniel. He's up at 7K, but he's, since the whole drama of, hey, he's in the doghouse, he's telling the coach off, went through that weird, randomly barely playing stretch. Now he's playing heavy minutes and he's producing at a high level. So whatever that was must have motivated, because now I'm looking at him at 7K and thinking, man, this guy might be borderline rosterable. But other than him, I don't have a lot of interest. Coleman Hawkins is too expensive for me. David Ngason, I like him in favorable matchups, but no real shot there either. Arizona defensively is good enough to cause him problems. On the Arizona side, we have plenty to like here. There is injury designations that we'll have to pay attention to. Trey Townsend is officially questionable. He's in concussion protocol, which did cost him the last game. I believe he did dress and try to go through warm-ups, but ended up getting ruled out. And then we saw Tobe Awaka, who was also questionable coming into last game. He ended up playing 21 minutes against Texas Tech, and he had just a monster 14-point, 11-rebound game. It is the fourth time in the last 5 games that he has been over 28 fantasy points, and third time in the past 5 that he's been over 33. So he's been having some huge games, and it hasn't taken him a lot of minutes to do it because he has great overall rates. Going up against this K-State team, the big worry with Tobe always is the fouls. If he stays out of foul trouble, he's okay. He's a bit spendy at 6'1". Carter Bryant, for that matter, also pretty spendy. The Arizona starters for last game, without Townsend, they still went ahead and started Carter Bryant. He did play 22 minutes, but he is a freshman, and he's still pretty raw. I know he's looked really good there for a stretch against Iowa State and Arizona State, but he's looked more like a freshman recently. He's locked into some pretty decent minutes, but 5'4" is just a little bit spendy there for me. I would rather pay up for, out of all the Arizona guys, a bench piece in Henry Visar. And without Townsend against Texas Tech, it was immediately, like, I was already kind of prepping you guys for that slate on the show. I believe that was on the show. And then in the Discord, people asking me, what are we going to do with Awaka if he plays this? And I kept saying, Henry Visar, man, his rates, his fantasy point per minute numbers, like this matchup with Texas Tech, they're banged up. Visar is going to just, put his nuts on the table, for lack of a better term. He didn't have a ton of ownership there because of the fact that he doesn't start over Carter Bryant. But he still played 30 minutes against Texas Tech, and they were crucial second half minutes there, especially 15 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Nobody's benefited more from the Matisse Krivas injury from earlier. You never want to see a guy get injured, but Visar, he is just playing incredibly well. And ordinarily, I would not want to be paying 6'4" for a guy off the bench, but Visar is one of the rare exceptions to that, and a spot against Kansas State that I think he could play really well in. 24 plus fantasy points in 3 straight. On the road against BYU, 22 minutes. On the road against ASU, 21 minutes. Then he had the 30 at home there. I can't sit here and say he'll play another 30 by any means, but you can see at 25 minutes, he's projecting over value. 24, pretty close. The 22 is probably a more realistic number. It does drop a bit after that, but I'm still very interested in him overall. Anthony Del Orso is only 3.8 as a starter. He doesn't do a whole lot for me. I'm not too keen on him. That's the price he's typically always going to be, sub 5K, sub 4K. So as we get into slates here where the pricing is tighter, he's one of those guys where you can kind of justify, okay, I need a starter at 3.8. Let me play Del Orso. He's typically just capped at 20. He's not going to play a whole lot because KJ Lewis, who they continue to bring off the bench, plays those second half minutes over him. So he's not the starter, but he's the closer. And Lewis played another 30 minutes last game against Texas Tech and had another really solid game. He's priced out for me at 7.2, but KJ Lewis, man, he looks like a future pro all the way. Great option typically, but a higher price this time, as most of the Arizona guys are. Jaden Bradley's a no-go at 7.5. He typically isn't going to hit at this price. I know he just put up 35 against Texas Tech. He also put up 36 against the tough Iowa State. That's ordinarily going to be more of the outlier than the norm for him. He is playing all the minutes he can handle, and his shot rate has increased in the past month. But I would much rather play KJ Lewis if you're putting the gun to the head, asking me to play one of those over 7K options. And then you have Caleb Love at nearly 9K. 2 games removed from a big 50. You guys know by now what he can do. He can break a slate or he can break your lineup. I'm not rostering him there at that 8.8, but it is a matchup he can take advantage of for sure. And I kind of hope that people stay off of Arizona because they're priced up. This is obviously a great spot against Kansas State. So I'm still heavily on Henry Visar, kind of a secret weapon for me. Definitely have some Tobe Awaka exposure. Even if Trey Townsend were to return and attempt to play here and clears concussion protocol, I still like Visar and Awaka. Probably too priced out on KJ Lewis, but he's obviously a solid look overall. He's going to take a ton of shots. If K-State keeps this as competitive as Vegas thinks, Lewis should play majority of the second half, which he is the closer. He gets free throws at the end. He can still pay that price off regardless. All right, last game on the slate here, DePaul versus Marquette. Very intriguing game here for a spread of 18.5. Marquette is projected there, 18.5 points, 143.5 total. Ordinarily, a big spread like that, you wouldn't want to look at the team that's projected to get their doors blown off. But DePaul, don't rule them out just yet. They've been great in games that are competitive and games that aren't. This is a much more fantasy-friendly DePaul team than we're accustomed to seeing. Maybe not as much as the JFL season for the couple of years that we had, our man JFL, Javonte Freeman, who we loved. But they got some dudes. And also there's some injuries, which has made this kind of deep rotation much shorter here, at least lately. Connor Enright has been ruled out for the remainder of the season. He's going to have shoulder surgery. He's been playing or trying to play through the shoulder injury for a while. Didn't work out, so he's done. Troy D'Amico dealing with what I believe is an illness from what I read, so he missed the last game too. Remains to be seen if he will start. He played in the Seton Hall game with the same illness, apparently. This norovirus stuff, man, it's scary. So we'll see if he ends up playing. He typically plays about 20 to 21 minutes anyways. And then David Skogman, who has the debilitating lower leg injury that has kept him out for just under 3 weeks now. And he's come back sparingly and hasn't been able to play through it. So they're down 3 pieces that play pretty significant minutes when they are healthy and around. In the last game there with DePaul, we saw Isaiah Rivera, CJ Gunn, Layden Blocker, NJ Benson, and Jacob Meyer as the starting 5. All of them played pretty significant minutes except for NJ Benson, who played just 19, but we got 33 plus out of Blocker, Gunn, and Rivera. Isaiah Rivera started early in the season, then he lost the starting gig to Connor Enright. Now he's back in the starting lineup. And Rivera has been pretty productive as a starter. He wasn't there against Nova, but he typically has been. Off the bench, we saw David Thomas, J.J. Traynor, and Chris Riddle. Riddle played about 7 minutes, so they were rocking a 7-man rotation, which is very possible here once again for DePaul. DePaul did play Marquette back on January 14th on their floor, DePaul's floor, and they did go to overtime. It was an 85-83 victory for Marquette. In that game, CJ Gunn was astounding, 21 points, 7 rebounds. You guys know I've been talking up CJ Gunn a lot. They're giving him all the minutes he can handle. Connor Enright had 11 points and 11 assists. NJ Benson had 10 points, 8 rebounds. Jacob Meyer had 12 and 4, and then Layden Blocker off the bench had 7, 3, and 5. And Isaiah Rivera hit 6 threes against them for 20 points and 7 rebounds. On the Marquette side, David Joplin had a 30-piece. Cam Jones had 18, 6, and 11. Chase Ross had 15 and 5 with 2 blocks and 3 steals. And Ben Gold had 14 real points. Definitely a stackable game. Happens to be the hammer. CJ Gunn is priced up at 7-3, but I still love exposure to CJ Gunn. He has become very steady and one of the safer players in the Big East. And he just does not get the level of rostership that he probably should. Definitely like him, regardless of the spread and in the spot. Already showed us that he could compete against Marquette at 34 minutes, over 30 fantasy points. Still like him quite a bit. Again, Enright is out for the season. Layden Blocker should play well over 30 minutes. NJ Benson typically will play over 30 minutes, so like him here as well. And then you've got Jacob Meyer and Isaiah Rivera rounding out the starters, both projecting over 4x with the minutes that we would expect. Rivera knocking on the door of 30 minutes there. He'll take a ton of threes. And then Jacob Meyer at 4.6. He's a nice value piece. Early in the season for DePaul, Meyer as a starter and off the bench, he was one of the higher usage guys, taking a lot of shots for them, and then he kind of got phased out with the emergence of Gunn and Blocker, but now a chance for him to be fantasy relevant once again. Same with J.J. Traynor, who did get a spot start a few weeks back. He is definitely benefiting the most out of the Troy D'Amico illness/injury. At about 20 minutes, he's overvalued there at near min price. He actually played over 20 minutes last time. And then David Thomas at 3.5. at 20 minutes projects extremely well. We've seen Thomas play some big minutes here in the past as these various injuries and illnesses strike through the team. And he's been pretty damn good when he's been given those minutes. You go back to the Seton Hall game, he played 24 minutes, 10 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He put up 22 fantasy points. Then his minutes as guys came back fell by the wayside, but against Villanova, they needed him. He played 26 minutes, 16 points, 1 assist, 1 block, 1 steal, 4 threes. He took 13 shots, 22 fantasy points at 3.5. So depending on what the status of D'Amico and Skogman are, we definitely want to look to David Thomas at 3.5, and we definitely want to look to JJ Traynor at 3.5 too. I feel like a DePaul mini stack might be the ticket and the best way to end up profitable at the end of the slate. And yes, that's weird for a team that's almost 20-point underdogs, but the short rotation and the solid rates on most of their remaining players put them into play. Rankings-wise, I would be right at the top with CJ Gunn. After that, probably Isaiah Riviera, then Benson, then Blocker, then Meyer, the fifth of the starters. And then depending on that news and how your lineup works, if you need some additional savings late, I would go David Thomas over JJ Traynor, but I think both could potentially be in play here. On the Marquette side, for a long time, most of the season, we've been able to ignore their bench, but that doesn't appear to be the case anymore. Still have Cam Jones, David Joplin, and Chase Ross playing all the minutes they can handle. Cam Jones absolutely smashed last slate. I mean, he was priced at 8.5. Anytime he's under 9K, I know he had a tough outing against St. John's and UConn and Butler, but anytime he's priced this low, you just have to really strongly consider him. And he had a monster 27, 4, and 6 performance against Creighton. Price has gone up from 8.5 to 9.1, but he's still very much in play. If you can fit Jones and Broom together, I think you're doing something special. Might not be able to, but both of those guys can anchor your lineups down and potentially combine for 100 points. That's a realistic possibility here in the spot. And remember, when they played DePaul last time, he had 18, 6, and 11. That is good for a 50 bomb. We had 50 from him at 9.1. It's going to be very hard to make those points up elsewhere. And I think he'll be pretty chalky. David Joplin, he's been hit or miss, but he can't, when he's on and he's hitting, he is very, very good. 22 shot attempts against Creighton, 4 of 10 from downtown, 22 and 8 for 33 fantasy points at 6.9. Secondary option, but definitely if you can't get to Cam Jones, this is one of those situations like with Broom. If you're not playing Jones, you're going to have to play one of his teammates. I think that's a very obvious point at this juncture. Chase Ross has been one of the main benefactors on days that Cam Jones has a rough game. But when Cam Jones dominates, then we see Chase Ross really take that step back. Terrible against Creighton, 24 minutes, 4 rebounds, 2 points, just couldn't get anything going. Then you see in games where Cam Jones was struggling, Chase Ross was dropping 30s. Last time they played DePaul, he did have 15, 5, and 2. Pretty much everybody had a good game in that overtime win. So he definitely is capable, but if you think Cam Jones is going to rattle off a big game, more often than not, I want to be away from Chase Ross. Those are not two players that I want to stack. It's one or the other for me. We saw Stevie Mitchell. He played 20 minutes against Creighton, 23 against St. John's, and 29 against UConn. So his minutes have steadily been declining, and this is a guy who had been playing about 30, 33 for a majority of the season. So declining minutes for Mitchell, and then seemingly declining minutes for Ben Gold, who did play only 17 against Creighton and was completely ineffective. And he's had a rough stretch over the last 4 games, and it's caused Ben Gold's price to drop very, very far to 3.8K. Now, we've seen 2 of Marquette's bench pieces play a lot more minutes here recently, Royce Parham and Zadie Lowry. Royce Parham is sitting there at 4.3. He's played 19-plus minutes in 3 straight, and he scored double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back games. Parham, when he gets out there, he's looking to shoot. He has the green light per shot of smart, and he's actually improved as a three-point shooter in conference play. So that is a player that is taking minutes directly out of the Ben Gold's pool, and he's now more expensive than Ben Gold. And then Zadie Lowry there at 4K, who's taking minutes out of Stevie Mitchell's pool. Played 23 minutes against St. John's. They had some foul issues early, but Lowry was knocking down a bunch of threes against St. John's, and they kind of rode him in the first half. Didn't do as much in the second half, but he had a big first half. Rewarded against Creighton, played 25 minutes, back-to-back games over 20, only 4K. maybe we see a spot start out of Lowry, but it's worth noting that his minutes are increased as well, just like Parham's. Ben Gold's going to be tough to get away from. I think he might end up kind of popular at that 3.8 price because people just assume he's going to play a ton of minutes. And you give him his, normal 24-ish minutes, you see he projects pretty well over 16 points. But if he's going to be down here at the 20 range, it can get ugly real fast. And a 70% owned Ben Gold dropping a 5. And if you faded the 5 salad, you're just going to be very high above the rest of the field there because that's going to be hard for them to make those points up, unless they've got Broom, Cam Jones, and various others dropping those 50 plus. But for now, I think that we see that elevated minutes for Lowry and Parham. I have them kind of tentatively pushed here at 18 and 19 minutes. Doesn't quite put them into play, but it's enough to make Ben Gold and Stevie Mitchell look like real mediocre plays. Whereas David Joplin, Chase Ross, and Cam Jones, at their expected minutes, all project extremely ham here against DePaul. So DePaul, Marquette stack. Give me CJ Gunn. Give me some David Thomas action. Maybe a little bit of NJ Benson. And then on the Marquette side, yes, I am prioritizing Cam Jones to a degree. And then on those non-Cam Jones lineups, I want A, Chase Ross, or B, David Joplin. Not sure I'm there with Parham and Lowry just yet, but do have interest in Ben Gold at 3.8. All right, so we did it. That's the slate. Let me input the rest of these teams real quick and add that back. Should set that up to make it faster. And then we'll take a look at what the kind of first look. We treat the other thing, we treat the show as more of a first look. So I do a bunch of research and all that overnight and into the morning. Release an article on big days like Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And things obviously change between now and lock. But this is a solid first look, give you an idea of where my head's at, what kind of content we actually provide here at FTN, and how value added that can be. And I always tell new viewers or people that are looking at maybe joining the FTN community as well, if you take nothing else from the subscription or being a part of the community, the Discord is honestly what I think one of the most valuable tools in all sports, because it's active not just with the providers but also in the creators, but also the members and community itself. If I have something going on and I have to step out or I'm not available, somebody in the community is posting starting lineups, injury news, and getting it out there to the rest of the community. So there's very little news that we miss, and it's really hard, right? News is constantly dropping, news that we know of ahead of time, but inevitably there's going to be a late scratch or something real close to lock that we weren't expecting. You have to scramble to figure that out. You find it. Not only did you find it, then you've got 2 minutes to kind of process that. And, what move do I make? What swap do I make? Oh, that was a bad swap tonight. Why did I do that? So let us find it for you, because we're going to find it with as much time as possible, and then you're going to have time to discuss that with us and the rest of the community and how we want to do that. Now, the nice thing is with injuries that we know of and expect, we don't just wait until the end to be like, okay, now what do we do? We give those scenarios. Okay, here's what we're going to do if Manny Sharp plays. Here's what we're going to do if Manny Sharp doesn't play, and kind of have those laid out so that ahead of time, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and you can make those decisions quickly. It's hard when there's an injury that comes down the pipeline with 2 minutes to go, but we do our best. And like I said, there's very few things that get by us. It's especially prudent on those Saturday night slates and afternoon slates where less people are paying attention to the news and they're setting lineups and walking away. You can get some really advantageous spots when there's a scratch, somebody who's owned 30%, and you were able to get off because most people missed that news. There's some other really good places out there that do a similar thing, but I feel pretty proud of the way that we're able to do it in the community that continues to grow each and every week, especially with the Super Show here, which is a self-produced show. So bear with me here with the stuff. Used to have an intro, but had to kick it. Working on getting a new intro and new song. So we were pretty lively around here, lively group. Late at night. Normally try to come on around midnight Eastern. Lately it's been later. That is going to go back to 9 p.m. PST here over the next couple of weeks, especially since we're going to be jamming out 4, 5, 6 shows per week. So be ready for that journey with us. All right. yammered on there so I could put in all those. Here's what we're looking at. Kind of first look. There's going to be some minutes out of whack. Didn't have a chance to edit all of the minutes beforehand, so keep that in mind. But here you can see pretty much what we were talking about in alignment. DePaul values rate really high. Marquette guys, David Joplin, Cam Jones, Aziz Bandiago, who's a great value piece. Denzel Aberdeen, obviously, if he starts with no Martin, he's a great overall play. Divine Ukachukwu. So we have a lot of value at our disposal. Guys that it's great because like Reuben Jones, who I'm not comfortable with at all, projects decently, but like I said, he doesn't really do all that well. We don't have to feel inclined to roster him because we might have that DePaul value. We have the Cincinnati value. We've got all these different ways we can go. So rostering Cam Jones and Janai Broome, very easy based on what we're looking at here. You also have those various Arizona pieces like an Anthony Delorso that can funnel in and act as a flexibility piece to be able to get you another payout. So that is the various looks there. If that all comes to fruition, it'll be a high-scoring slate, but there will, of course, be some landmines. So this is a part of the show where I give a three-man core what I'm looking at, and that could change also prior to lock. But the three-man core that I'm really going to be utilizing here, Cam Jones. If I have to pick one between Janai Broome and Cam Jones, I'm going the Cam Jones route, but I'm going to try to roster both. But Cam Jones, core play number one. Core play number two for me is going to be the freshman from Miami, Divine Ukachukwu. I've seen him play several times watching Miami games in a starter role. I think he's a really good look, especially in a favorable matchup against Syracuse. So he's one of my favorite values for sure. And then core play number three in Posh Play of the Day. So let's explain what that is. That's my version of a sneak. Basically somebody who I think is going to be under 30%, but has a chance to go 5x plus and really act as a play that no one else really uses except our community. And when he goes off, we have that great chance of hitting those green screens, right? It's named the Posh Play because of Posh Alexander, who now plays for Dayton. But in the glory days, he was a freshman, sophomore at St. John's. Never rostered by anybody. We put up these 30-plus games at a low salary, low rostership. So it developed from there. But that's my guy still, even if he's not having the best year at Dayton. But in honor of him, it stays the Posh Play of the Day, which is my sneak version. That's going to be CJ Gunn of DePaul. I'm going with that DePaul two-piece. One of the David Thomas, perhaps I go David Thomas. We'll see if I can pull the trigger. But one of those cheap DePaul plays, whether it's David Thomas or JJ Traynor, drew a blank there, plus CJ Gunn. So, yes, he's the most expensive at 7.3, but we can make it work. And we can even fit Gunn with Broome and Cam Jones. We may have to miss out on some of those mid-range plays like the N.J. Benson's, Dylan Mitchell's, Jason Edwards of the world, but there is enough 5K and below plays that I think are viable enough that we can make those three happen and actually have still a pretty competitive lineup overall. So it is gearing up to be a stars and scrubs build, which I'm not that keen on, but when there's decent enough value like this, I'll definitely go that route and feel pretty good about it. But you can see there is a lineup that exists with Chase Ross, Dylan Mitchell, N.J. Benson, some of these mid-range guys, Igor Milicic, not to mention even Zakai Zeigler, who isn't going to project as high as some of these other guys, but very, very easily could wind up in the optimal build. All right. Let's get some props up because we did have some questions about that. And then some best bets, and then we'll get out of here. Let's just look at the updated Prize Picks board here. So I do like TKR under 19.5 points. It under stressed me out. I was talking about that in the betting Discord earlier today. Like we had the under Manny Sharp 10.5, and he had 10 with like 8 minutes left, and then ended up thankfully not getting it. But unders just, I don't know about you guys, under stress me out way more than overs do. But I do like the under 19.5 on TKR on the road against Michigan. I feel like foul trouble is going to happen. Yes, he's been great scoring 20 plus with regularity, but that just seems like a very strong under 19.5 for TKR. So I'm going to lean into that one. Let's CJ Gunn over 13.5 points. He's the posh play. Come on. Definitely like that. We saw in the projection here, CJ Gunn, have him at 17.5 points. So yes, I love that. Over 13.5 all day long. We'll take that. By the way, we don't have time to talk about the night slate, but we do have coverage of that in the Discord via projection. So I have projection sheet for the main and the night slate. So I do provide that coverage there with slate context notes as well, just FYI. UConn versus Creighton game is going to be awesome. That's going to be a fun one. Do like Liam McNeely over 13 points and also like Solo Ball over 15 points against Creighton. They have been a very fantasy-friendly defense throughout. So that is 2 props I will definitely be on as well. And then there was one more down here in the later games. So San Diego State taking on San Jose State. I don't know if you guys have seen what Magoon Guath has been doing for San Diego State, but he is quickly becoming an absolute stud, like future stud in the front court, a la Jaden Leday. His point prop is 10. Definitely hitting the over there. He scored 15, 24, 14, and 15 over his last 4. He scored 30-plus fantasy points in those last 4, and San Jose State is one of the worst teams in the Mountain West. They do not have an answer for Magoon. As long as he doesn't foul and they are at home, he is going to put up 10-plus points with ease. So over 10 points for Magoon Guath, a very easy prop there for me. All right, let's get into some best bets. I mentioned the Arizona -3. I think that's a really strong bet against Kansas State. That's one of my favorites. UAB -2 versus ECU. UAB's on the road, but I think they'll have ECU's number there. Axel Lendenberg, there's not anyone on ECU that can deal with him. We have a bunch of MAC games. We had the MAC Sun Belt Challenge over the weekend. That was fun. Northern Illinois -2 versus Buffalo. Like that one quite a bit. I will sprinkle UCF +7.5 at home against Iowa State, just in case Iowa State wants to continue to play cold. UConn +3 versus Creighton. Yes, UConn is not going to three-peat. I think that's pretty obvious, but don't count them out just yet. I think Creighton is vulnerable here, so I will take UConn +3. And then, let's see, let's go down to this Mountain West action. SDSU -6.5 against San Jose State. And then under 137 total points between Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Those are my best bets. Those will all be in the tracker as well for those that have exposure or are part of our subs. That tracker is part of the betting sub, and that is every bet that we make, not only listed in the Discord, but also what we talk about, anything like that. It's all tracked so that we have full transparency. And yeah, that's what we do. So I appreciate it. All the new people who checked out the show, hopefully you did enjoy it. Please make sure on your way out you hit that like button. It does help a tremendous amount. And if you're watching the show on demand, please feel free to drop a comment. I always circle back around before a lock to answer those questions or thank you for your time. But any comment, question, or concern is much appreciated. It can be something as simple as hi. But all that stuff helps in the algorithm-based world that we live in. We'll be back tomorrow night, same time, same place. Might be a little bit later, just depending on when that night slate ends and if we have a sweat or not. But 2 very good slates. Also, we'll be rolling out the FanDuel projections, which we started doing today. For those of you that are playing more on FanDuel because it's soft, totally understand that. And we'll have projections for both sites throughout the rest of the season. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much. Hopefully very soon we'll get a show back up here. Or not show, an intro song back up because I do miss that part of the show, but that's okay. Appreciate it very much. You guys take care. Best of luck. Let's get those green screens. Let's get those window trips. Let's keep it running. February has been good to us and is going to continue to stay that way into March Madness. Thanks, guys. Take care.